All right, we are recording and live on YouTube.
One moment, though, Mayor, please. Go ahead. You're muted, Mayor, but you can go ahead.
That's what I was asking. All right. Welcome everyone to tonight's council conference. And we're beginning early at 5 p.m. and we have one item on the agenda: continued discussion regarding a possible general obligation bond election for Norman Forward projects, municipal facility projects, and an economic stimulus package for small businesses. I believe we have a presentation to start us off.
Yes. Jason, do you want to get us going?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well and staying safe. Thank you so much for having me again this evening. I will tell you, I, of course, enjoy any opportunity to get in front of council, but if I'm being completely honest, there's a part of me that hopes that this is the last time that we do this via video conference. I can tell you for sure that my wife would echo that sentiment. It's her job to keep the kids and the dog quiet while this is going on. And so, I know that she, in fact, would prefer me be in council chambers this evening. Anyways, this evening's presentation, so this is going to be our fifth installment. This is obviously an ongoing conversation about this significant funding gap that we find on several of these significant projects for the city of Norman. And so we obviously ran out of time a little bit on April 14th. And so it's our hope that this presentation this evening will give us an opportunity to bring our conversation from session 4 to kind of a more logical appropriate conclusion. So while we've talked about the funding gap on each of the projects extensively over the past several weeks, the goal of the previous presentations were largely to present information on each project to council. And so basically so that you guys could provide us guidance on how to move the projects past this significant juncture that they are currently at. From our perspective, it feels as though the tone of this conversation has changed a little bit in the last couple of weeks. We do feel like clear direction has been given by council on several items related to this conversation. And so the focus of the team has accordingly shifted from informing council on the projects to executing on the direction that has been provided by council. And so as a result of this shift, I think you'll notice that our presentation has changed a little bit this evening. Instead of informing council on these project specifics, we'll largely be focused on clarifying our current direction on a handful of items and then giving you an opportunity to ask questions and obviously discuss any outstanding topics or issues that you may want to this evening. So I will add that this is going to be a brief presentation. I think I have about 8 or 9 slides, and so it should leave us plenty of opportunity at the end to have a discussion and for you guys to ask questions. And so with that, I think I'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to switch my screen over if you'll give me just 1 second here. Can everybody, let's see. Can everybody see my screen okay?
Yes.
Okay. So, so as I said, the fifth installment of this conversation. And so I've started here with just a really quick recap of the 4th session. And so the slide that you see here is largely just the items that we were focused on getting some guidance on when we met on the 14th. And so in large part, we've received guidance on several of these items. And so what we're really going to do here this evening, the approach we're going to take is we're just going to march down this list a little bit here this evening and just basically circle back with council and just provide you some clarification on what our current direction is on each one of these items. So the first of these items, the timing of the potential bond election. Obviously, we talked at length several weeks ago about potentially a June election, and then that date came and went, and we quickly switched over to a conversation around an August election. And so the schedule that you see here is the one that we shared last time we met on the 14th. And so as we discussed last time, first reading would be May 26th at here in council chambers. June 9th would be second reading of the ordinance, and then of course that would go to the election board on June 10th, and then a vote on August 25th. And so this is what the timeline looks like for an August election. We have had some internal conversations about potentially some polling that might go on within this timeline. And so the goal, I believe, as I understand today, and I'm sure there's staff members that could comment more specifically on this, is that we would conduct that polling in a way so that council could be informed by the results of that polling prior to a second reading being completed in June of the ordinance. And so in large part, the timing of the potential bond election, we feel like that's been clarified, that we understand council's intentions. And so we're moving forward in that direction today. The second item on this list, the amendments to the A&E contracts. We talked about this extensively 2 weeks ago. And then the City Finance Director, Anthony, talked about it again last week during another study session. And so as we discussed, each one of the projects, the teams are kind of at this, they're at this significant juncture. They're trying to figure out how to move the projects forward. And so the amendments to the A&E contracts would allow us to let those continue to move forward. And so we brought with us just a quick table. You can see a list here of all the projects as we discussed them last week. I'm not going to go through each project, but you can see here what we anticipate in terms of contract amendment dates. And so you can see several of those are listed in May. There are also the Parks Maintenance Facility, the Fleet and Fire Maintenance Facility are listed in April. As we discussed last time, there's already been some amendments that have gone through on those. You can see that the homeless shelter, we're proposing, it's not really an amendment. I would say it's more of a contract date of July of 2020. And so as we discussed last time, we felt like the next logical step in that project was to get some consultants on board to help the city through that strategic planning process. And so that July 2020 date that you see on the slide is basically when we feel like we can get through that selection process and get someone started. And so that's the amendment piece. And so we feel like that's largely been answered, and we are moving forward in that direction. We actually already have several of those amendments in draft form in our hands, and we've been reviewing those with staff over the last several days. And so the next item on the list, the removal of the fire and fleet maintenance from the bond election package. This was a conversation that we had a little bit on the 14th, but if you'll recall, of course, the chart there at the top probably looks familiar or should look familiar to everyone. You can see all the projects of the, we had identified it as transit and fire maintenance during the second session, but the two graphs at the bottom, you will probably look familiar. The one on the left was the original project budget, what we anticipated the funding gap to be, the 7.9 million. But if you remember, we had this conversation during the last session about a $5.1 million federal grant that had been received by the city of Norman. So with that and some scope adjustments that were made in the project, the funding gap in that project was reduced to $2.1 million. And so because the gap had been reduced so significantly, there was this conversation that was going on about, well, could we potentially pull it out of the bond election, potentially fund it through capital fund, and so that it would allow that project to move forward regardless of how an August election might turn out. And so we had that conversation. I believe that in talking with staff, our understanding is that if in fact the bond election is successful, the idea was to keep it in the bond election. And the reason for that is if the project can continue to move forward, if in fact the bond election is successful, the $2.1 million that's identified in the bond election could be used to potentially refund the money to the capital fund. And so that's largely where we've arrived at today. I will tell you, we've had a little bit of conversation with staff over the past week. We've looked at this site plan a lot over the past 4 or 5 sessions. And so, as you know, there's multiple facilities on here. It gets a little bit complicated because the North Base property kind of straddles the line on our graph in terms of the 2 buckets of projects that we've been studying. Part of the facilities that are on the property are in the Norman Forward group of projects, the Park Maintenance Facility, and part of the projects are in the Municipal Services projects. And so it's been a little bit complicated in terms of how we deal with this, but just to give you some idea of kind of where we've arrived on this. So you see the site plan at the top, the fire and fleet maintenance facility. That facility and the infrastructure around it is really what's represented by the $8.1 million that you see in the graph on the bottom right-hand corner of the slide. And so the park maintenance facility, as I mentioned previously, it lives in the other bucket, in the Norman Ford group of projects. And so it's not funded with this $8.1 million that's identified here. The one change that was made during the last session is there's two facilities that are also on the property, the city wash facility and a fire storage facility. And so with the thought that we potentially may fund this project out of the capital fund and what's the bare minimum that we need to get by, the two facilities that you see there in green were actually removed out of that project. And so in talking with staff over the last week or so, we've had a conversation. And so we've added those projects back in. And so you can see that the total budget for the fleet and fire maintenance facility now sits at $11 million. Park maintenance facility would be $4.8 million. So between those two would be $15.8 million. And so as of today, those are in the bond election as we understand it. So we feel like that question's been answered, and we have marked it off the list and are moving forward in that direction. The homeless project we've talked a lot about. We've talked about a strategic plan and what we feel like the next logical steps are. And so within the context of the original funding analysis, you can see here this graph, again, I'm sure looks familiar. The Homeless Resource Center does not appear on it though. And so as we've had this conversation, we have in fact added it in to the list of projects that we believe are going to be included in the bond election. So you can see that here. And so with that change and the two changes, the changes to the park maintenance facility and the fleet and fire maintenance facility that we just discussed, you can see that brings our total amount for the Norman Ford projects to approximately $89.1 million. Municipal services projects to $24.2 million, which gives us a total deficit of $113.3 million. So I know you'll probably realize that this is slightly higher than the $112.7 million that we discussed in session 2 and a little bit in session 3. And in large part, that is because of the complexities of the North Base property. When you co-locate those facilities, there's a lot of questions that come up in terms of shared infrastructure costs and things of that nature. And so there's been some things that have moved back and forth. And with all of those adjustments, going back and researching the numbers, getting everything buttoned up, we have increased the whole package to about $113.3 million. And so we feel like we have marked that one off the list and are moving forward in that direction. And so you can see here on the list of things that we feel like need to be touched on in order to move a bond election forward is obviously the addition of this business recovery package. We talked about it a little bit last week. And, I think there'll probably be some more discussion about it here this evening, but that really wraps up our presentation this evening. That's the direction that we're heading on each one of these items. And so we're really kind of at the end of this. I, of course, would love to answer any questions that council may have of us. I know that staff's here too, and we'll hop in as appropriate. So Mayor, is there anything I can answer for you specifically, I guess?
For me, no. I'll see if there are any other questions from council.
We have a couple of questions. I'll start with Councilmember Wilson.
How would I know we talked about it before, but there's been a lot of stuff hitting my brain. Well, how would these items be separated on the ballot? Anybody?
Catherine, would you like to answer that? Or
Catherine, maybe.
Sure. So the Norman Forward projects would be one question. They are considered public utilities, the Oklahoma Constitution, and so they would be grouped together as one question. As we talked before, the homeless resource facility would fit into that grouping as well. The second question would be the municipal services projects, the EOC, the municipal complex, those kind of things. And then the third question, move forward with that, is the economic development piece. And that's a separate question because it's called under a different section of the Constitution.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
okay, we also have Councilmember. Were you through, Councilmember Wilson?
Yeah, that was it. I'm sorry. Thank you.
We have Councilmember Holman. Ready?
Yeah, thank you. I think a couple of mine were actually answered towards the end of the presentation there, but just to clarify about the homeless shelter, the dates of between July and February, that's the time period that the study would actually be conducted. And so we would expect to have it back by February. Is that the way I understood that?
Yes, sir. That's just based on the research that we've done on the City of Oklahoma City process. You may remember from our last session, their process is essentially going to take about 12 months for them to get through. And so that's just our best guess on, we could be a little bit quicker than that potentially, but we've tried to allow some time to get the contract negotiated, get them in place. I mean, obviously a lot of, I think as it relates to the schedule on that study, a lot of it will be dependent on how much attention they can get from the various service providers and the people that need to be involved in that. But assuming that all those people have the bandwidth to get involved, yeah, I think 9 months is reasonable to get that process done.
So about February, that's what we would be talking to voters about when we're trying to say, pitching this bond to voters, saying the study part, we expect to have this back by February, and that's going to guide, we think, February based on what Oklahoma City has done. And then that's when we expect to implement the funds that you're approving in this bond. Is that what I understand?
Yeah, yes, sir. Yeah, I think I'm trying to refresh my memory to the slide that we presented last session. February would be about 7 months, 7 to 8 months. So it might be like a March or maybe even April, but certainly somewhere right in there in the spring.
Okay, I appreciate that. I think that's definitely very helpful that we can give people an idea of the time frame that this study would be going on and when we would expect to have some information to guide our decisions on in the future. So appreciate that. A couple of the other things I had, these were kind of questions I had when I was thinking that those items were actually going to be removed from the bond regarding the fleet and fire. And that just really, I was going to ask about a couple things that come to mind directly that are unfunded that we might have been able to put in there instead if we were taking something out. And that really, maybe the fire chief or Anthony Francisco, I'm not sure, can answer, but I was wondering if these two, well, I guess one of them is in the public safety sales tax, but the construction of a new fire station number 10 and the reconstruction and relocation of fire station 5, are those funded? Do we know how we're going to fund them? Because I know PSST being underwater, I don't envision that it's going to be able to fund those two things. So I was wondering if those two are funded. I know we probably don't have funding identified to actually staff them, but
yeah. And that's the latter thing that you said is more the issue with Fire Station 10. Fire Station 5 is one of the critical capital needs that was identified in the PSST 2 ordinance. The current plan is once we have paid off the bonds for the EOC building and the radio system, we should be in a position to move forward with that project with relocating Fire Station 5. But as far as Fire Station 10, no, it is not included in PSST, and we would certainly have to identify some funding for staffing it.
okay. Like I said, I appreciate that, Anthony. Those are just two things that came to mind that we might have been able to add if we were looking at taking something out that I felt were pretty pressing. The other one too was, have we identified funding for a bus transfer, bus hub outside of the campus?
No, we have not, although that is certainly something that council's talked about as a high priority. If we were successful in getting the GO bonds passed, then the money that would be reimbursed to the capital fund at council's discretion could be used for that. And I would think that it wouldn't take up all of that $2 million to build that sort of facility.
Okay, thank you, Anthony. Those are really two questions I had about, again, if we were taking things out, some things that came directly to mind that need funding that would kind of fit in with public safety or municipal services type stuff. So, but I think if we're keeping those projects in for now. And, Fire Station 5 does have a plan through the PSST, and that we might have a plan here for the bus hub. I don't know, unless Chief King says otherwise, that Fire Station 10 is an immediate need. I wouldn't think we would need to include that in this particular bond. So that's all.
Station, if I may, Station 10, it is important, absolutely.
Yeah.
The problem we're going to have with that is the personnel part of that.
Right.
And so that can't be issued, obviously, in a bond. So maybe in a future year, in the years to come, as soon as we can look at the personnel aspect, absolutely, I would love to put something forth in a bond proposal for Station 10 and maybe some training ground improvements, so maybe a package deal at some later point. But yeah, right now that seems a little bit difficult.
Thank you, Chief King. Anthony, does the PSST allow for, would it allow for revenue bonds to be issued at some point based on that permanent revenue source for a fire station number 10?
Yes, and we issued revenue bonds, as you'll recall, for the radio system and for the EOC building.
Since fire station number 10 is not part of PSST as far as what voters voted on, would that be something that could be paid for by a revenue bond that PSST backed up?
Once all of the critical capital needs that were identified in PSST Ordinance 2 have been completed, then yes, I would think it could be done.
Okay, but not employee costs.
Employee costs could as well. If there was enough money there, it would be authorized.
Right. And I guess the 32 original positions for firefighter, I think it was. So, okay, well, I appreciate that. That's very helpful information to me. So thanks, everyone.
Councilmember Wilson has another question.
Okay, Anthony, I don't know that I completely understand municipal bonds and how they work. So historically, how does a bond issuance react or work during an economic climate that we're currently in or barreling towards? Do we have is there a behavior that we need to be concerned about on these, as far as, do you understand what I'm trying to ask?
Yes, the behavior of the bond market certainly responds to the behavior of the overall national, world, and local economy. But it more so would have to do with the interest rates that you would have to pay, as opposed to being able to sell the bonds at all. In the case where general obligation bonds are backed by the more secure property tax, there would not be as much of a concern about things going on in the local sales tax based economy that are affecting, for example, our general fund. But if the voters authorized a general obligation bond, the investors in those bonds are going to look toward the property tax base rather than the sales tax base. So we would be at least better off in the case of a voter authorized general obligation bond than the sales tax based revenue bonds that we did, for example, for the public safety sales tax critical capital needs. It would be a lot more difficult to sell those revenue bonds in this market environment than it was 3 or 4 years ago when we actually sold them.
So what happens, what happens if we start having some mass foreclosures on people's properties? Does that affect that?
It could, and again, that's one of the things that the market is looking towards when they are considering the health of your property tax base. And again, unless you went 50% foreclosures or something like that market-wide, you would still be able to sell the bonds. It would just be at a higher interest rate.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I don't see any more questions right now, Mayor. I know that Sarah Kaplan is prepared to present the results of the business survey that was conducted over the last couple of weeks. If you would like her to do that now, and then you can continue your discussion about that last package.
As long as we're done with the first parts of the package, everyone good to move forward?
Wait a
Councilmember
minute.
True?
Okay, Councilmember Trump. Okay, hang on.
Okay, sorry. I was trying to find my raised hand and I couldn't see it over there. Oh, there it is. Okay. Okay, on the Mr. Cotton, last week when we discussed with Anthony, with Mr. Francisco, there was questions about whether or not, if the bond doesn't pass, whether or not we can still use those same drawings to move forward with Norman Forward projects under the amount of funding that we currently have slated. In other words, it wouldn't be wasted work product because it will work anyway. Can you speak to that? What exactly it is that they would be doing with this tied over money?
Well, unfortunately, I don't know that I can offer one. I think it's, each project is a little bit different, you know, as we discussed, like they're all in various phases. You know, when you look at Reeves Park, we have a design team that's essentially finished construction documents for a project that was in budget under the original funding. And so for Reeves Park, what that looks like is the project is the construction drawings or the schematic design documents that they would prepare under these amendments would likely be shelved, and we would move forward with the drawings that they had previously prepared. Each one of the projects is a little different. Ruby Grant, for example, is in construction. What we would likely do on Ruby Grant is just continue forward with that contractor as we are today. So each one of the projects is a little bit different. You know, I believe that there are projects where we may potentially have to spend some time going back and getting the drawings to an appropriate level of completion within the context of the original budgets. So a good example of this would be the indoor aquatic facility. I can't remember the specifics on the pool dimensions, but you know, there's a significant difference. I'm sure you understand there's a significant difference between a $56 or a $58 million facility and a $22 million facility. And so I don't know that there's any way for us to necessarily sequence that. You know, there may potentially be some options where perhaps one part of the facility moves forward and another one doesn't. And so we have some options to make use of the effort that the teams are going to put forward to these new projects. But you know, it's a project by project discussion, and they're all, I think the answer is a little bit different for each one. So I know that's probably not the most straightforward answer, but it's the fact, it's the truth of where we're at with each one of them. So.
Okay, well, would it be possible for you to kind of let us know which one of these, you know, which projects we would not be gambling with just losing the money and having to repeat that same work going back to the old budget should the bond not pass? And the reason why I'm concerned about this is we know that Norman Forward is already severely constrained as far as the budgets there are concerned. I mean, without even our eyes being big, and we want these amazing projects, because I think that there's no question there. Everybody on council wants that. But if we're reliant on bonds, and I just don't want to throw away $600,000 on A&E work that we would have to repeat. If there are certain ones of those, like you just said on Reeves, like that would have to be shelved. It is extremely irresponsible to not be willing to wait a couple of months to find out whether or not that's what the voters want to do, because ultimately we're going to move forward on Norman Forward projects with the capital that we have if the bond does not pass. And trust me, I hope it passes, but we don't have control over what's happening in the world today. And so I want to make sure that every dime of taxpayer money that we're able to collect goes to the actual projects. So would you be able to take a look at those projects and say, I feel confident that these particular projects, if we move forward on the tide over money, no matter what, it's going to go to that project, because I just don't want stuff sitting and collecting dust on a shelf when it could have gone to the projects under the old funding.
Right.
Would you be able to do that?
Yeah, I'm sure we could put something together. You know, some of the conversations we've had at ADG, just internal to our staff, is this conversation about, I mean, you know, obviously the best way that you can move the program of projects forward and still meet all of what the voters' original desires were. I mean, you start having this conversation about, well, are there projects that maybe don't move forward, so that we can fund the ones that we do want as a community to the fullest extent possible. And so obviously that gets a little bit dicey. Everybody's got a different opinion of which ones are more important. We'd like to do all of them, but you know, the fact of the matter is, you know, there are certain projects that we just simply can't move forward with the current funding. You know, the football, softball facility is a good example. Like, we would just not build that facility just because it won't meet the community needs. And so, but yeah, we could certainly go back and look at that a little bit more and give you some more insight as to where we would end up on each one of the projects should the bond election fail, and what that design effort would go towards.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that this money works for us no matter what, so that we're not just throwing away taxpayer dollars over the next couple of months because we're impatient. Does that make sense? Like, we can move forward on some of them because we know for a fact, no matter what, this is going to be work that, irrespective of the outcome of the bond, this work is going towards that project, and that's not going to change. I don't want to flush taxpayer dollars. That doesn't make any sense to me. So that I would appreciate that if you could give us, here's, you know, help us look at it in that direction. Okay.
Sure.
And then on the homeless shelter, where is the money coming from for the study that would start prior to the bond? Did I understand that correctly? Because if we're not having a bond election until August 25th, I totally agree with having a study. I just don't know where the dollars are coming from to pay for the study.
I may let Anthony speak. Yeah, Anthony, did you want to speak to this real quick?
Yeah, council's discussion had been that that would come from the capital fund. So we're working on an amendment to the city manager's proposed budget that would include that project for fiscal year 2021.
Okay, and did we say how much we ballparked or budgeted for that?
My understanding of the estimate, and I don't know if James on the call, but I think it was 250,000.
Okay. And when is the polling going to be taking place?
We talked about towards the end of May to get, you know, past this current environment a little bit and have people kind of back into a routine, especially those that are moving back into phase 1 and 2. So you may not actually see the results of that until after the first reading ordinance, but you would still be able, if the polling wasn't what council desired to see, you still be able to not approve it at second reading and not move it forward.
Okay. And Mayor, were you, was the next part of this presentation going to be about the economic development bond piece?
Yes.
Okay, because I'm in the dark on what that even looks like. So I think that's all I have for the moment. Thank you.
Okay, we have Councilmember Bierman.
So I really appreciate when my council members ask questions, because then it makes me realize sometimes that I came away from a meeting with a totally different interpretation. So Jason or Anthony or Bria or whoever would like to correct me if I'm wrong, but I came away from the last meeting about the A&E contracts believing that if the voters did not approve the bond in August, then all of those plans would be shelved until such time as the funding became available. And so you know, my question, this is actually maybe a question for the full council, is before we send this to the voters, if we decide to pass this in June, I think we're going to have to be very clear about what we're going to do if it doesn't pass. Are we then just going to go through and build the projects within the budget that we were originally given, and which voters therefore will have told us they don't want to increase? Or are we going to put the plans on the shelf and wait however long it takes until we can come up with the funding for them? And I don't know where we stand on that. So I certainly don't want to make any inferences on how everyone else feels, but I think that this is something we're going to have to talk about is what are we going to do? Are we going to say, sorry, the voters clearly only want to spend this much money and therefore we are only going to use the funds that were given to us in the original Norman Forward plan? Or do we say, sorry, Sooner Swim, sorry, Optimist Club, we don't have the money right now, but at some point in the future, we might. So I'm sure there's no answer right this second, but this is something we're going to have to talk about at least. I don't know that I'd be able to vote on this in June without having a clear sense of what the next step is going to be if the funding's not there.
Speaking only from what I understood council's direction to be, it was, and this was really, as you recall, in response to a question from you, Councilmember Bierman, when you asked me, what is your plan B? And the answer was that, yes, we would go back to what was available in the original revenue sources. We would build the facilities that we were budgeted for in the original Norman Forward package. We would not build a homeless facility. We would build based on the federal grant and the money that we freed up in the capital fund. We would build the fire and transit maintenance facility. But again, it's, as Jason said, it's kind of a different answer for each of the projects. But generally speaking, it's kind of that plan B that you ask about. We go back to square one where we are now.
So then that really does, I appreciate that, because then that really does change how I feel about the A&E extensions. It feels like an awful lot of money to spend without knowing whether or not we're actually going to be able to use those plans. If we were going to shelve them and say, well, I guess we're going to wait until we can build the facility that these organizations want, then I'm okay with spending that money if it's eventually going to go to some purpose. But if it's not, then I don't know that we have enough certainty for me to be able to say whether or not I know that these projects are going to have the funding that they need. So I'm glad that I re-asked the question a second time. And thank you, Allison, for bringing that up, because I would have had a completely different sense of it had you not asked that question.
And again, I think you really need to heed what Jason said about a different answer for each project, because where square one is with the senior center, for example, is that the plans would be used. It's just that we go back to that phasing and we wouldn't build certain parts of that facility that have been drawn up for 2 or 3 years or whatever. And we go back to, that's what square one is for that project. Square one is different for different projects.
Yep, and that's very
exactly
fair.
the reason why I was hoping that Mr. Cotton would. Sorry, I interrupted. That's exactly the reason why I was hoping that Mr. Cotton could be able to put them into columns like that. Instead of taking a holistic view, look at each project specifically and help us to, we haven't just taken the risk at just throwing taxpayer dollars away. That's what I want to make sure we don't do.
And I completely agree. And that's
Right.
something that I think we need to pursue, is looking at each of them individually and say, is this a project that we'll be continuing forward with regardless of whether or not the bond passes? Because on those, I think it's fine for us to continue with it. But if there's no way that we are ever going to eventually build the aquatic center the way the plans are designed, if it's a completely different set of plans, then yeah, I think that that's something that needs to wait. I know that one has a pencils down date a lot later than any of the others, but that's the kind of detail on each project that I'm going to need in order to feel better about those A&E extensions. That's all.
I think I would add kind of what we touched on. I get everyone's concern, but we want to take it to the voters and give them the opportunity to pass the plan. And I think we need to be ready to move forward, and having the plans there are a key part of that. If we decide to delay, Mr. Cotton, can you explain how long that will delay the overall process should it pass in August?
I'm not quite sure I understood the question, Mayor. You're saying you're saying if we wait until the August election to decide whether or not to move the teams forward, like how much of a delay that would equate to?
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, we're sitting here today. I mean, the teams are essentially stopped on several of these projects. And so, I mean, we're 4 months from August by the time we get them back under contract and started. I mean, I think you're looking at probably a 6-month delay on all the projects, would be my guess.
And how far are we delayed on Norman Forward overall?
That's probably a question I can't answer sitting here today. I'm not sure I have all that in front of me.
I think, Judd, could you possibly tell us, at least with the multi-sports and aquatic facility? I feel like it's a couple years.
Yeah, I think it is that far. With the original timeline, I don't have the timeline in front of me either, but because we revised it at one point, and I'd have to check the original or the revised timeline date, but we're probably a year, I'm guessing a year behind on that at least. That's just a guess, because again, I'm sorry I don't have that in front of me, but I would refer back to the amended timeline in the plan that we adopted and see what that timeline said.
Well, and then I guess you need to consider what side you fall on. Do we want to be ready to move forward the moment that it passes, should it pass? Or is it like with my student loans where, man, what's another few thousand more? You know, we've already waited this long, let's wait a bit longer. I got the impression that people were ready to move forward and ready to work to pass the plan. So I think it would behoove us to do our part to be shovel ready and all that if and when it passes. That's my 2 cents on it.
Okay, Councilmember Scanlon.
It's just listening to the conversation, particularly that the Congresspersons Patron and Bierman brought up. I think we do have to decide going into this election what we expect coming out of it. And my impression certainly was, I'll use 2 examples. One being the Aquatic Center. If we have plans to do a 50-meter pool and the bond issue doesn't pass, do we do a 25-meter pool? I hope not. The ad hoc committee that we put a lot of stead in is said otherwise. And principal among their reasons is the revenue that we would make by to offset operating costs and other things by having a pool that we can in fact have competitive meets in. And a 25-meter pool doesn't satisfy that itch. So I would hope on considering that individual project that if we pay some A&E money to do the plans for the 50-meter pool, that's not money wasted, because ultimately that's what we want. And if we get it later because of the bond issue failing, so be it. At least we have what we want. Another example on the municipal side is the EOC. If we build an emergency operations center that does not meet the needs and the downscaled plan that was worked to fit within the budget doesn't meet a need, then where are we? That facility, I think I recall, would not be hardened. That's one of the things we want it to be. We want to have room for dispatchers to work in, as opposed to out of the basement of the police station, which is hard by a railroad track that has 35 freight trains going through it every day with a lot of hazardous material. So again, I'd rather have the EOC later and what we want, what we need, than as opposed to downscaling to fit a budget. That's a fool's errand as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, but I think we need to figure this out before we go to the voters, and then let the voters decide. And what they tell us based on the way we set it up, we'll know whether we want to spend the bond money, assuming we get it, to do those things now, or we just defer it and do it when we can, but get what we want. I'll shut up.
Okay, Councilmember Holman.
Anthony, are we able to fund the original budget for the aquatic center and indoor multi-sport gymnasium that was approved by voters? Do we think we'll be able to fund that if we had to just go with that?
Yes, we've made every effort to make sure that we can fund all of the Norman Forward projects at their budgeted level.
And that's what we agreed to spend on the projects according to the UNP TIF agreement, was to spend at minimum the amount of money that voters approved in 2015, correct?
Don't know if I'd say at minimum, but yes, you know, that the $22.5 million figure is in those agreements.
So that's a facility, with that, we could build something with that. It just would not be what the ad hoc committees have recommended at this point. Okay. I agree with several of the comments of my colleagues that I definitely want to see a more detailed list of the projects as far as where they would be if in the scenario that a bond doesn't pass, it does pass. Because I do think there are a couple projects that are so large in scope, and that scope being based on what the ad hoc committees have told us, that they wouldn't be able to be done right away. They would have to wait until there's funding. But I think some other projects would be able to go forward should the bond fail. Other projects that have already been approved would go forward. But some other projects, I do think they're so large in scale and cost that they would probably have to wait until there was additional funding available to meet what the ad hoc committees and the people that I think are going to use those facilities expect to get out of them as well. So that's why I think some of these plans are worth having, because I think the plans that will be developed are really the way that we should go on those projects. And then other ones, if it doesn't pass, we can go forward with and get them done, I think. So I'm okay with having these detailed plans, but like my colleague, Councilmember Patron mentioned, I do want to see kind of where these projects would be at, what they're standing, what do we think the standing would be should a bond election not pass, and how do we think we proceed? So that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, Mayor, I'm seeing no other questions at this time. If you would like for Sarah to come on and share her screen and start that other dialogue.
I definitely want to keep us moving forward in the interest of time, but I feel like we've gone backwards from what we decided a week ago. So I don't know if we've helped much with our guidance, unfortunately. So I think we might need to, again, decide what direction we want to give. I mean, are we waiting for more information then?
I thought, you know, we staff were moving forward from the direction that we got last week to move forward with these architectural amendment contracts. But just remember, when the contracts come to council, you could just not approve them. So you're not at a decision point on the A&E contracts right now. We're just at a direction to move forward with putting them on the council agenda.
When would they get on the agenda?
I think several of them have been scheduled for May, whatever the first meeting in May.
May 12th.
Yeah, we're working to get them on the 12th. And it looks like they're all ready to go, or will be.
Would it be possible to delay it to where we could see on the ones that we're concerned about regarding the polling?
Sure. I mean, we can do whatever you want us to do.
What are everyone's thoughts on that?
I'm good with going forward. Like I said, I think the information about where these projects are in the different scenarios, should a bond pass or not pass, I think is just helpful for us to know regardless. So I'm okay with staff proceeding and these being on the agenda. And if things change before then, as mentioned, I think we can vote to delay or postpone them as long as we feel necessary.
Sounds reasonable.
Councilmember Patron has a question.
I was just going to say that if by the 12th, if he could just put it together individually to where it's the A&E contract and whether or not that work product is still going to be immediately useful post bond election should it fail. That's what I want to know on each one. And then we can vote up or down on each A&E contract. Because for me, I'm not going to support an A&E contract that is running the risk of just throwing away $100,000 for no reason. I'm not going to do that. So if we can have each one to say, yes, this work product will be relevant regardless, or no, this work product is absolutely contingent on a bond passing. I'm patient enough to wait a few months. That's where I'm at.
Understand, and we can have that ready on the 12th.
Thank you.
Councilmember Scanlon has another comment.
I'm just going to agree with Councilmember Holman. My view, and I think I expressed it a while ago, is that we've heard what the users of these facilities want, and my particular bent is that that's what happens if the bond doesn't pass. It takes longer to do those things, and in that context, those plans are not wasted. So we still have to have that debate, but and I want to see all of the information that we can have as soon as we can have it. But that's my view, that these are not wasted A&E funds and that we should proceed.
Okay, well, that sounds like proceed, and we'll take a look at them when we get them on the agenda. So with that, let's pivot to Ms. Kaplan. If you would show us the results of the survey for the Business Recovery Economic Package.
Sure. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Hopefully you all can hear me okay. Bear with me, this is my first telecast Zoom conference, so hopefully I'll figure this all out. I'm going to share my screen right now. I think you were all emailed this survey results. These are just preliminary results. The survey is still going to be open for a couple of more days. And after that, I will be further analyzing those details. Can you guys see that okay?
Can you blow it up a little bit, Sarah?
Yep, I can. Let's see here. Okay. All right. Okay, that's a little odd. I'll make it a little bigger. Here we go. Okay. Is that a little bit better?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so I asked, we put this together, this survey with our partners. It's been out for a couple of weeks now. And this is probably just the first survey in a series as we move from our stay at home to, as we begin to transition to the rebooting and reopening of Norman. We'll probably do a few more surveys similar to this to kind of assess our business sentiment as we move forward. So the first several questions are just basic business demographic kind of information. How many employees do you have? That sort of thing. So you can see that the vast majority of the businesses that responded, we had about 380 or so responses. I've gotten a couple of more since I've put this report together. But the vast majority are very small businesses, under 10, under 20, make up the vast majority of small businesses that responded to this survey. Again, the vast majority, also 90%, had one business location in Norman. A couple had several, but for the majority, it's sole location businesses. You can see in this next chart, I asked industry sector. And so I had listed all the North American industry classification categories. You can see that little white blurry chunk is where people wrote in some more specific information. So I'll go back and reclassify those into their NAICS code, but we did have a wide response from a lot of different types of businesses. So I just wanted to show that on that. From the survey, from that that previous question, about 13% were retail trade, 13% professional services, and then a smattering of other types of businesses. So we'll go through and I'll recalculate that when we have the final survey in. The vast majority of these businesses have been in Norman for more than 10 years. So I thought that was really interesting that these, businesses that have made it through that, initial business hurdle those first few years. I know that you guys had discussed programs for minority and women-owned businesses. So we asked that question to kind of gauge that result. I didn't list an option for locally family-owned because I assumed most of them were in that category, but we did have a few out-of-state ownerships, some co-op owned, those kind of things. But About half of them were female owned, a few franchise businesses that do have local owners here, that sort of thing. The next question was if you own or lease your business space. I know that's a challenge because while businesses are struggling with their revenue, their landlords are also struggling if they're maybe not getting rent. So I thought that was an important question to ask. About 60% of them lease, and then we have a few home-based or mobile or no physical space that their business operates in. About 71% have no online sales component or had no online sales component. So as we consider, retail businesses specifically, that's very important for them under the current orders. And then of those that had a retail online, some sort of online sales platform, it was not a significant portion of their business. The second section of questions really had to do more with how has your business been impacted specifically? So we asked how many of them were deemed essential versus non-essential. So almost 60% of them were actually deemed in the essential category. And then we asked them, how has your business been affected? 85%, obviously, loss of revenue has been the biggest effect, but also cancellations of events that their businesses rely on, closures, whether that's voluntary or mandated. Additional expenses, if you had to buy masks or cleaning supplies that you normally did not have, those sort of things. So lots of answers there. And then we also had a lot of write-in answers as well. Concerns about employees, not just their financial well-being, but their health and wellness as well. A lot of our businesses were very concerned about keeping their staff safe and their customers safe. And then I asked the question of how has your revenue changed? You can see that about 50% of them have lost 50% or more of their business, of their revenue. There's a couple of cases where people actually have increased revenue. You guys can kind of imagine what sectors would have increased revenues right now. And then I asked the question, if business disruption continues, how long is it before you really have to think about permanent closures? Fortunately, this little blue right here was less than 1 month. So there are some that are worried about that right now. There's some that, in that 1 to 3 month sector, but really, the next 3 to 6 months is going to be really crucial for probably about half of them. Most of the rest of that little white and blurry check section was, I don't know, or I'm not sure, or that sort of thing. And then the next thing is what you were most concerned about. Obviously, losing work and revenue and clients, those sort of things, paying your rent and mortgages and utilities, employees, financial welfare, customer traffic, making payroll currently and beyond this existing month, losing employees, supply chain issues, accessing government support, all those things. This one, next question is what type of assistance is most helpful? Number one, obviously 52% of them said capital. And I think that's what we're going to see is most of them need access to money. And hopefully a lot of them, you'll see in a later section, have gotten some federal relief, but I think that's probably still top of mind for people, especially in this phase. Information on financial assistance, how to protect my employees and customers, which I know we issued a lot of that information today with the new orders. Assistance on how to reopen, and then also technical training. Do you need help answering HR questions? Do you need help developing an e-commerce platform? Do you need help with social media? And those sort of things. The next question we asked about was, have you already applied for some of the federal programs? And keep in mind that when this survey was out, it was after PPP applications were out and the funding ran out in the middle of this survey, and now it's since been replenished. So this is kind of an interesting snapshot in time. 65% of the people did apply for PPP. I'm blocking my numbers here. It looks like a large percentage applied for the EIDL, which is another SBA program. About a quarter did not apply for any funding. And then there was a few other things and other write-in answers as well. About 47% of those people actually received funding from one of those sources, which is good news. So I think as we look to design a package for our businesses here in Norman, we need to find out what those holes were. So we'll delve deeper into the data and ask some more and do some more surveys. Several of them, I asked them why they did not apply for funding if they didn't. A lot of them self-selected they were not eligible or not aware of it or had trouble with the paperwork. And that is pretty much it. We did ask if people wanted to be contacted. About a quarter of people would like a follow-up, and I will begin that process here in the next week. And then we'll follow up with some additional survey results. And that's all I have. I'm happy to answer questions. And should I share my screen or keep it shared? Go ahead and share for now, Sarah.
I was gonna say, put it to the part where what they need the most. I think
Okay.
I'd like to see that one again real quick.
I think that is this one. Access to capital is about half of those people. Information over the next 90 days on financial assistance. How to protect my employees and customers. I think that's probably top of mind at this moment as people think about reopening. So I think some of these things we can start talking about right now. We can do the third and fourth one immediately. And we can start some of these technical training things with our partners. There's a lot of great resources out there. So those top two, though, I think are the key.
So what kind of loans and grants can cities offer? Like, what is Oklahoma City doing? What are they seeing that's working, that's not working?
Yeah.
That's, I think, clearly where the need's going to be.
So Oklahoma City's package is a $5.5 million package. They had some existing funding that they were able to move to this cause. So their business recovery, they have 4 different parts of their program. The first is a grant. And so that's for a $10,000 grant for small businesses, less than 10 employees. I think you had to be able to demonstrate that you had a significant decline in your revenue from March 2019 to March 2020. So showing from this year to last year, you significantly declined in business. The second component was a loan, a low interest rate loan for up to $50,000 for businesses with under 50 employees. I believe there was a forgiveness option on there too if you meet certain qualifications. There was also another loan program that was up to $100,000 if you have less than 50 employees. It was a 2% interest on a 10-year term, so pretty good rates. And then the fourth component was that technical assistance program, and that they allocated about $500,000 for that, and that was to match businesses with resources that they need. So if they need someone to help them navigate how to build a website, build a social media presence, maybe they need help with employee information, they did an RFQ for professionals to come in, consultants, and help kind of do a matchmaking with individual businesses on what they needed specifically at that time. So they were able to act really quick. I believe they're, they released this in mid to early April, and we're hoping to get money into people's hands by the end of April. Obviously, we don't have money sitting there to do that part immediately, but we can plan to fill the gaps that the federal programs and maybe any state programs missed. So,
well, we've spoken about how some of the benefits of us having time to do this is to see again what works and what doesn't in Oklahoma City, and then really address the needs of our businesses. With reopening, there are requirements in place, so it would be nice to include something like a little pot of money for reimbursement for all the masks that they have to provide for employees, any other thing, so that way we can make them whole again afterwards. And I hope people will consider, as much as they can, reusable masks, because that'll help a lot, I think, preserve resources, especially if we see a second wave and then things start vanishing again. So that was kind of my 2 cents. I think the loans are a great idea. I love the forgiveness, reimbursement for any expenses people are acquiring right now. Does anyone else have any input on that?
We have a few hands up. Councilmember Scanlon.
One of the things that caught my eye as I was looking at the list of what ifs and ways that that businesses want help. We have a university in this town, and members of this university are usually quick to give us advice on a lot of stuff. Here's a case where businesses in this community might benefit from words on business models and that kind of thing. And maybe we pay the university for it, maybe we don't, maybe in the goodness of their heart, some of these people use us as a laboratory. But it just seems to me a natural thing that we should get the university involved in at least some of this stuff, because it's what they profess to do.
Well, we do also have programs like the Irani K. Irani Center for the Creation of Economic Wealth. And so maybe that's something that we could, and I think it's free for businesses to participate, but somehow support that program if they focus only on Norman businesses. But yeah, I love that, linking current resources with current needs and within our city.
Indeed, if it already exists, that's great, but we should certainly encourage more of that. And I know from having visited some of the laboratories and so on down in the technology area. I mean, the labs are there. We just need to publicize the association. And I know NEDC tries, but we need to make a renewed effort in that regard. This is important, and this is a natural.
I also think it's important that we're addressing businesses that have not been able to qualify for the federal funding. As you all know, we have the medical marijuana industry that does not qualify. We have, I heard from NEDC, some entrepreneurs that because of the stage of where they're at in their business don't qualify. So I know also that, and I don't know how this would work, but many of our contract employees were supposed to be able to qualify for unemployment and still haven't seen that. So they're taking an extra hit. So anything we can do, I mean, is first we have to identify the holes, address the needs of the businesses and fill it all in. So this is a great start. Who's next?
Councilmember Wilson.
Okay. So on this small business economic development, I would really like to see this be sort of an endowment, if we can do that. I don't know if that's something we can do with bond funds. But I want to see it to have multiple legs: incubate, recover, and I don't know what that other side might look like, but I would like to incubate new businesses. I would like to recover current businesses. I would also like to see this go towards, like Mayor, you said, businesses that haven't received funding, minority-owned businesses, and or really innovative businesses. But I would like to find a way to make this work in perpetuity. Does that make sense? To make this continue, to make the money work for us, to make it grow for us. I know $5 million is not that much money, especially when you're talking about the severe hits that we've all received. So I would also like to see maybe a Norman Foundation populate out of this. And I don't know if that's something we can commingle or not. But that's where I want to go with it. So the end.
Your Honor, the conversation regarding the opportunity to develop a revolving loan fund whereby loan repayments by the first round of recipients becomes the bucket of money available to loan to the second round of recipients. And we think about, what a great time to need financing when interest rates are very low. This would be a good time to establish a revolving loan fund, as long as the statutes for this GO bond question would provide for that opportunity. I think it makes perfect sense what you're describing.
Thank you.
Okay, we have Councilmember Bierman.
So I love all of this. I feel I can't remember at what point last year Daryl and I spoke about this after I looked at the city of Chickasha's economic development program, and this was exactly what I had in mind, was some kind of revolving fund where one deposit by the city worked for businesses in this community long after that. So I am firmly in support of that. Some of my notes had already been discussed. The last time we talked about this, I also agreed that I wanted to make sure that we had an emphasis on businesses that had not received any kind of federal assistance, and I obviously still feel that way. I also had a note here about the PUA eligible gig workers and self-employed individuals that are not able to get any kind of funding, and I agree with that. Another thing I want us to look at is I've been seeing a lot of reports of one of the reasons why businesses are being rejected from federal aid is because of issues with their credit, either not having high enough credit, having a decently high debt load, and maybe having too many inquiries on their credit. And so whatever we can do to minimize the impact that someone's credit history or credit inquiries has on this, I think is appropriate. There are a lot of businesses that open just through sweat and hard work and no lending or need to use any kind of credit history. And so I don't want to see those businesses fail simply because of the bureaucratic red tape that often goes along with lending programs. I also want to throw my 2 cents out here that I want this to be a city managed program. That I know we have some other business entities in this community that would probably love an opportunity to manage a program like this. I think this needs to be a city program. It's city tax dollars, and if we're going to have this be some kind of a revolving fund, I think it should continue to be maintained through the city. Not the least of reasons being that we need to ensure strong oversight and reporting of this money. And I'm going to continue to hammer that home every time we talk about it. And the only way to ensure that is to ensure that everything we do is covered under FOIA requests. And if an outside agency manages this program, I think it calls that into question. And so I also would like, as much as I would like to see this be mostly a loan program that also works into the future, I would like to see some grants included in this. I don't know if 50-50 is the right way to do it, but I think there does need to be some no strings attached money. There are going to be a lot of businesses that would even struggle to repay a loan because this is revenue that they've lost that they're never going to get back. And especially with all the added costs for compliance with the absolutely necessary but still costly disinfecting and sanitizing protocols that are going to need to go into reopening a business, I think it's important that we take that into account and offer some grant opportunities, or as Mayor Clark said, some reimbursement for that. Just to find sanitizer tablets for the one business of ours that is still open, I had to pay 2.5 times as much. And partly it was because I wasn't able to get it from the regular suppliers, and the ones that did have it available had no problem charging me extra. So I really like the start of this program, and I would like to see us keep talking about it. Every time we do, we get more detail, and I always really like that. So I'm sure other people have questions, so I'll leave it there for now.
Okay, we have Councilmember Hall.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Just some thoughts off the top of my head. I'm interested a little bit in how we go forward because of the timing of this. When you're comparing and contrasting the rapidity that, or the fact that Oklahoma City can move in real time and be ready to roll out their program at the end of this month or early next month versus we won't be in a position to do anything until after the August election. So I want to make sure that we're thinking, 3 months out of what the needs may be at that time, because I was struck with some of the statistics that Sarah Kaplan presented that I think it was the majority of respondents said that the next 3 to 6 months are the most crucial for the viability of their business. So, what they might need right now versus what they might need when we're in a position to do something in August, I think I'd like to, flesh that out a little bit more and understand a little bit better about what would be the most useful, because we have the waiting time and taking advantage of being able to leverage the funds that we would have in the best possible way. 52% responded that their most crucial need was access to capital. So I do like the idea of some kind of combination of loan and grant program. I also was struck by the fact that the vast majority of respondents had less than 50 employees, and the length that they've been contributing to the Norman economy. So I'm really interested in focusing on those businesses with less than 50 employees, particularly the ones that, for all the reasons that we've mentioned already, that just are falling through the cracks and not eligible for multiple reasons with the funds available from the federal level. So I'd like to make sure we focus on that 35% that have not been able to get any kind of assistance in other ways. So I think those are the main points right now. And I do think this is a really a program that is really needed in our community. And I'm intrigued with how the city can put this forward, and the way that we put the details together. And I also am in favor of a Cindy Advantage program, since this is taxpayer money that we're talking about. So that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Okay, we have Councilmember Carter, and I have a couple of more hands up. We're coming short on time. We can always continue this discussion next Tuesday at the end of your budget study session. We are also, the storm is headed in, and the mayor is having some difficulties. So we'll go ahead and take Councilmember Carter's comments, and then if there's time, we'll take the other two, and then we may have to take a break to see if Mayor Clark can get reconnected before the regular meeting.
I agree with my colleagues that spoke just previously, so I'll take my hand down. Thanks.
Okay. Councilmember Carter.
Come on, Clark. Be strong. Get connected. I guess my first opinion or thought on this is that this is probably outside of all of our areas of expertise. And I would strongly encourage us to employ the services of an outside expert to design a plan that wants to accomplish some goals that we define. Just seems like right up Cynthia Rogers' alley, or maybe there's another economist at OU, a local economist, or even our current economist that we have a contract with, Dr. Evans at the Minders School of Business, that might help us design a plan that accomplishes our goals. And to me, defining our goals, have a lot of different things. A lot of things that I've heard so far from other council members, which are all great ideas, but they are kind of like to me, they're more like long-term economic development plans, where we have a brush fire going on right now, and we need to put out the fire. And so the two areas, I think in terms of businesses, non-essential businesses that have been closed for the last month and a half-ish, which I happen to own one, they're in dire straits. They need something to stimulate economic activity, and so I don't know how to do that. Of course, I have ideas on how to do that, but again, that would be a area of expertise. How to put people in restaurants, how to put people in hair salons, how to put people in I'll throw a bone to my colleagues on council, boarding and grooming facilities. All of these non-essential businesses are in terrible shape right now. And so we need to drive business their way. I still fall back on Council Members Bierman's idea of a Beautify Norman concept where there would be money, say you could apply for a grant to plant a tree in your yard or your neighborhood, and that money would need to be then spent on a local business in a Norman zip code, let's say, for example, something like that. You know, driving retail, you know, our goals, driving retail sales, protecting employment, increasing unemployment. Has anybody, I mean, Sarah, do we have any idea what unemployment has done in Norman specifically? You know, has it gone to 20%? You know, we were at 3%, you couldn't even hire anybody. You know,
Yeah.
where are we with
I've been following
unemployment?
some Oklahoma City market data. It's a little early to say for sure, but with the COVID response plus the oil and gas industry, the reports are predicting, I mean, it's all a forecast at this point, but we could see it hit 20% in the Oklahoma City metro area, maybe higher, and then the recovery is over a few years on the, you know, kind of a worst case scenario, and then could be faster. I haven't seen specifically from Norman, but areas like Norman, you know, we have a lot of employment in the retail and hospitality sector, and those were hit hard. So it's hard to gauge at this point. We don't have those numbers. I haven't seen those numbers yet, but we'll be looking at them closely, I'm sure.
Well, just on, I guess it was Channel 4 last night, one of the news stations, there was a Norman family that were wrecking their home, and the husband was 20 or 25 years in the oil field, then laid off, the wife's laid off. You know, I mean, there's one thing that stops consumer spending, that's fear of employment. If you think you're going to lose your job, or if you've lost your job. So to me, anything that stabilizes employment, anything that drives retail spending, are all going to be the things that improve consumer confidence. And, you know, that's the fire hose. You know, I'm personally involved with a microloan program in Vietnam, for example. Not that we're Vietnam yet, but it's just the kind of the program that you were talking about. We loan money to a farmer to buy a cow. It's a no interest loan. The cow has a baby. He sells the baby, he pays the loan back. Then we loan the money to the next farmer to buy a cow. You know, so that kind of a program, that's a great program, but I don't think that drives consumer spending, increases consumer confidence, improves unemployment, all of that stuff over the next 3 months. I mean, that's what's going to be the difference between a second quarter dip recession or a 2-year depression. You know, and those are the big pictures. And so again, to try and employ an economist like Dr. Rogers seems like an outstanding, great gifted mind in this area, or something like that, or Dr. Evans, and try and get some feedback from them before our vote. The second meeting in May would be very valuable for me. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Patron is the last one with their hand up, and so we'll let her do her comments, and then we'll take a break. Go ahead, Councilmember Patron.
Well, I've got several different bullet points here, and I think the break is extremely important. So what I think I might do is save most of it for miscellaneous comment from the city council meeting, because it doesn't look like that's going to be a very long meeting. But I think a lot of the ideas that other council members have come forward with are really important, but I have some pointed things I'd like to say myself, especially perhaps an answer to this "what do we do immediately" question. And so stay tuned, because I have an idea that I would like to present at miscellaneous comments.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, she's back.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it's coming and going. But I hear most of it. I just can't, you don't move. Last thing I'll throw in while we're considering businesses that need help, I would throw out our nonprofits, especially our arts community, especially those that have had events canceled, and even our youth sports, if they end up having lost revenue because of all the timing of this. So I think it should be accessible to them as well. We will continue this discussion, Brenda, as a second item on our study session next week. But for now, take a short break, turn your cameras and mics off, and we will resume with the regular council meeting. Thank you.
Okay, Mayor. We are going out live now. Bria, are you with us?
Yes, but I'm trying to figure out my AirPods real quick. It may not just work, so.
Okay.
No, I'll just go back to what I was using.
Council members, I'll just remind you, if you will unmute your own mic as we go through roll call, it'll help me out a lot.
Oh, I gotta turn my camera back on. All right, we all here?
We're all here.
Okay. Good evening and welcome to the City Council, Norman Utilities Authority, Norman Municipal Authority, and Norman Tax Increment Finance Authority meeting of April 28th, 2020. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Bierman,
Here.
Councilmember Carter. I'll come back to him. Councilmember Patron,
Here.
Councilmember Hall,
Here.
Councilmember Wilson,
Here.
Councilmember Scanlon,
Here.
Councilmember Holloman,
Here.
Councilmember Scott,
I'm here.
Councilmember Carter. See if I see him. Councilmember Carter, are you with us?
Yes. Yes.
Mayor Clark.
Here. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
and
to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. That will never be something I get used to. Item 3, approval of the City Council, Norman Utilities Authority, Norman Municipal Authority, and Norman Tax Increment Finance Authority minutes of April 14th, 2020. I need a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Second.
The motion on the floor is to approve the minutes. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Bierman,
Aye.
Councilmember Carter, Councilmember Patron,
Aye.
Councilmember Hall,
Aye.
Councilmember Wilson,
Yes.
Councilmember Scanlon,
Aye.
Councilmember Holman,
Yes.
Councilmember Scott,
Yes.
Councilmember Carter. Get him. He's going in and out. Mayor Clark.
Yes.
Minutes were passed unanimously.
Item 4, Proclamation 1920-36, proclaiming the week of April 20 through April 24, 2020 as OU Staff Week in the City of Norman. I'll entertain a motion to acknowledge receipt of the proclamation.
So moved.
Second.
The motion on the floor is to acknowledge receipt of the proclamation. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Bierman,
Aye.
Councilmember Carter,
Aye.
Councilmember Patron,
Aye.
Councilmember Hall,
Aye.
Councilmember Wilson,
Yes.
Councilmember Scanlon,
Aye.
Councilmember Holman,
Yes.
Councilmember Scott,
Yes.
Mayor Clark.
Yes. A proclamation of the mayor of the city of Norman, Oklahoma, proclaiming the week of April 20 through 24, 2020 as OU Staff Week in the city of Norman. Whereas the staff of the University of Oklahoma play an essential role in the university community through their service to students, faculty, and the public. And whereas their accomplishments reflect honor on the city of Norman and contribute significantly to its quality of life. And whereas OU Staff Week is sponsored by the member groups and standing committees of the Staff Senate, and this year's theme is OU Staff, one team, one family, one university. And whereas the Norman community expresses great appreciation for the continued support of OU staff to the community. Now therefore I, Mayor of the City of Norman, Oklahoma, do hereby proclaim the week of April 20th through 24th, 2020 as OU Staff Week in the City of Norman, Oklahoma, during which the University of Oklahoma staff are entitled to all honors and privileges occurring thereto. I will add, as a staff member at the University of Oklahoma, I was very impressed with how the committee pivoted and offered a lot of programming online. So well done on being versatile and adaptable in this crazy environment. And thank you to all of the work that you do for our students who are also residents in the city of Norman. Item 5, Proclamation 1920-40, proclaiming the month of May 2020 as Mental Health Awareness Month in the city of Norman. I'll entertain a motion to acknowledge receipt of the proclamation.
So moved.
Second.
Ooh, I win.
The motion on the floor is to acknowledge receipt of the proclamation. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Bierman,
Aye.
Councilmember Carter,
Aye.
Councilmember Patron,
Aye.
Councilmember Hall,
Aye.
Councilmember Wilson,
Yes.
Councilmember Scanlon,
Aye.
Councilmember Holman,
Yes.
Councilmember Scott,
Yes.
Mayor
My
Clark.
house is shaking.
Yes.
The proclamation passes unanimously.
A proclamation of the mayor of the city of Norman, Oklahoma, proclaiming the month of May 2020 as Mental Health Awareness Month in the city of Norman. Whereas since 1949, Mental Health America and its affiliates have led the observance of May as Mental Health Month to raise awareness, educate communities, eliminate stigma, and encourage treatment. And whereas mental illnesses affect millions of Americans and do not discriminate among genders, races, ethnicities, and socioeconomic statuses. And whereas Mental Health America's theme for 2020 is Tools to Thrive and focuses on providing practical tools that everyone can use to improve their mental health and increase resiliency regardless of the situations or challenges they are dealing with. And whereas while 1 in 5 people will experience a mental illness during their lifetime, the unique and unprecedented challenges resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic, such as increased isolation, loneliness, worry, and anxiety, have highlighted the fact that mental health affects all people. And that is even more important now than ever to raise awareness and focus on practical tools that everyone can use to improve their mental health, such as recognizing your emotions, owning your feelings, working to find the positive even when facing adversity or loss, reaching out and trying to connect with others, and creating healthy routines to take care of yourself. And whereas mental health screening is essential during times of stress, and it is imperative that we continue to work together to take care of our mental health and to look forward and focus on what we need to individually and as a community to thrive in these uncertain times. Now, therefore, I, Mayor of the City of Norman, Oklahoma, do hereby proclaim the month of May 2020 as Mental Health Awareness Month in the City of Norman, and encourage all citizens, government agencies, public and private institutions, businesses, and schools to recommit our community to increasing awareness and understanding of mental health, and to work together to support one another so that we may continue to thrive individually and as a community. I really appreciate that proclamation as well at this time. I know that a lot of people are struggling with all of the things listed there. We are very, very fortunate to have a lot of mental health resources in Norman. One of them, the Community Mental Health Center, you do not need insurance for. So there are plenty of resources out there. And I believe we have them listed on our coronavirus.normanok.gov website. So take care of yourselves and be sure to check on your neighbors. Item 6, consent docket. The item is placed on the agenda so that the City Council by unanimous consent can designate those routine agenda items that they wish to be approved or acknowledged by one motion. I need a motion to place items 7 through 16 on the consent docket.
So moved.
So moved. Second.
The motion on the floor is to place items 7 through 16 on the consent docket. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll?
Councilmember Bierman,
Aye.
Councilmember Carter,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Patron,
Aye.
Councilmember Hall,
Aye.
Councilmember Wilson,
Yes.
Councilmember Scanlon,
Aye.
Councilmember Holman,
Yes.
Councilmember Scott,
Yes.
Mayor Clark.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Item 7, Finance Director's Investment Report as of March 31st, 2020. Item 8, monthly departmental reports for the month of March 2020. Item 9, bid 1920-57, contract 1920-123 with Jordan Contractors Incorporated in the amount of $370,105 for the FYE 2017 sewer maintenance project, phase 2, and performance bond 1920-83, statutory bond 1920-84, and maintenance bond 1920-53, and budget transfers between project accounts. Item 10, declaration of surplus and or obsolete equipment and materials and authorizing the sale or donation thereof, old library furniture and equipment. Item 11, amendment number 3 to contract 1213-165 with Cabinets Engineering LLC, increasing amount by $175,000 for a revised amount of $575,800 to provide additional design services for the Porter Avenue Streetscape Bond Project and budget transfer between project accounts. Item 12, amendment number 1 to contract 1617-98 with Adkins North America Incorporated, increasing contract by $19,500 for a revised amount of $132,400 to provide additional engineering and design services for the 2016 Bond Road Reconstruction Project, Pickard Avenue from Kansas Street to Acre Street, and budget transfer between project accounts. Item 13, amendment number 2 to contract 1920-32 with the Board of Regents of the University of Oklahoma, extending the term of the lease agreement for office space, service bays, fleet storage, and warehouse garage space to be used for providing transportation services until December 31st, 2020. Item 14, contract 1920-124 with MacArthur Associated Consultants, LLC, in the amount of $287,000 to provide the engineering design of the Gray Street two-way conversion 2019 bond project and budget transfers between project accounts. Item 15, resolution 1920-107, authorizing settlement of a claim filed by Kenneth Wayne Albertson II under the Oklahoma Workers' Compensation Statutes. Item 16, resolution 1920-108, authorizing the city manager or his designee to submit a grant application to the Federal Transit Administration fiscal year 2020 grants for bus and bus facilities programs and expressing its commitment to secure local funding for the local match if such grant is awarded and projects approved. I need a motion to approve or reject the consent docket.
So moved.
Second.
Are there any comments from council regarding any item on the consent docket? Please raise your hand if you have a comment. Councilmember Hall.
Yes. I just wanted to point out agenda item number 11 and thank Mr. O'Leary and the Public Works Department for their fast action and problem solving to adjust what needed to be done to extend the Porter Corridor Streetscape project. And I am so glad to see that on the agenda tonight and appreciate the quick action that they've taken to correct what needed to be done to fulfill the wishes of the voters on the Porter Streetscape project. Thank you for that.
Agreed. Any other comments from council regarding the consent docket?
I'm seeing no other comments, Mayor.
All right, seeing none, are there any comments from the public regarding this item?
If I have that in your script, that's wrong.
Oh,
Consent
my
docket.
apologies. The motion on the floor is to approve the consent docket. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Bierman,
Aye.
Councilmember Carter,
Aye.
Councilmember Patron,
Aye.
Councilmember Hall,
Aye.
Councilmember Wilson,
Yes.
Councilmember Scanlon,
Aye.
Councilmember Holman,
Yes.
Councilmember Scott,
Yes.
Mayor Clark.
Yes.
The consent docket is approved unanimously.
We have two items off consent tonight. The first is item 17, ordinance 1920-42, granting special use for a public utility for property zoned A2 Rural Agricultural District located approximately a half mile south of East Robinson Street and a half mile east of 48th Avenue Northeast. I'll entertain a motion to adopt or reject the ordinance on second reading, section by section.
So moved.
Second.
All right, I would like to recognize Adam Stiegelstein, Project Director, to make the presentation.
Thank you. First off, are we okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, I'm going to attempt to share my presentation with you. Can we see this okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, thank you. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to present to you all this evening under these circumstances. I do want to take a moment just to applaud you all for focusing on the safety and security of your citizens and other stakeholders, doing business within Norman, but at the same time also, promoting economic development and kind of keeping that engine moving. So I appreciate that, first off. So jumping straight into the project, again, my name is Adam Siegelstein. I'm a project director with NextEra Energy Resources, and I've put together a few slides today there we go. To discuss a solar project we are developing, an exciting project in the city of Norman. It's just about a 10-minute presentation. I tried to include a lot of pretty pictures for you all, and try not to get into too great of depth, but at the same time going into sufficient depth to describe the project. So I'll start with just kind of introducing the company I work for, who we are. I'll talk a little bit about the project, of course, and also highlight a few of the benefits of the project. As I said, I work for NextEra Energy Resources, which is one of two main subsidiaries of NextEra Energy, Inc. NextEra Energy is a clean energy leader with an over 95-year track record. Our two main subsidiaries are NextEra Energy Resources, where I work, and we are the world leader in renewable generation. And then the other main subsidiary is Florida Power and Light, or FPL, which is one of the largest utilities in the country and the largest in the state of Florida. DG Central One LLC, which is the name of the applicant for the permit, is an indirect, wholly owned subsidiary of NextEra Energy Resources. So if you haven't heard of NextEra, I'll give you some highlights of things that we're particularly proud of, based on our years developing projects in Oklahoma. We've been developing in Oklahoma for 17 years. We have 15 wind energy centers, and plus 3 more in development. We have a transmission line also in development. And we have a wind, solar, and battery energy storage project in development. So just to highlight a few stats that we're particularly proud of, over the years, we've invested over $5 billion into the state of Oklahoma annually. We promote $32 million, or I should say we support $32 million of annual payrolls. We also make in excess of $10 million a year to annual or in the form of annual land payments to landowners. And of course, we also pay in excess of $9 million per year in property taxes and similar payments. So just a few stats I wanted to highlight. Of course, we're very proud of our experience in the state of Oklahoma. So digging into the project itself a little bit, we're requesting a special use permit for the Norman Solar Project. It is a 2 megawatt AC ground mounted solar project. The site and the parcel on which it's being developed is just about 5 miles east of downtown Norman. It's a 15-acre development on a 40-acre tract. And I have a site plan in a few slides I'll show you. Just off of East Robinson Street between 48th Street and 60th Avenue. The land itself is owned by Norman Public Schools. So they're a very important stakeholder in this project. They are leasing the land to Oklahoma Electric Cooperative, or OEC, and OEC in turn is leasing or subleasing the land to DG Central One. So just a little bit more detail about the project. Again, not going into too much depth. The parcel on which the project is developed, or is being developed, I should say, is zoned A2, Rural Agricultural District. The project will be comprised of approximately 7,000 solar panels. These panels are mounted on a tracking, single-axis tracking racking system. The height of the panels and the tracking system is approximately 8 to 10 feet at its highest point. And of course, they're trackers. So over the course of the day, they follow the sun from east to west. Now, for the most part, when you look at the solar project, you'll see mostly panels, but there are other components as well, cables, inverters, transformer, things like that. And the project will be surrounded by a 7-foot high security fence. And then underneath the panels, we will plant typically native species of low growth shade tolerant grasses that will grow throughout the year. And then lastly, the project interconnects directly into OEC's distribution system. Here's just kind of a simple picture. Probably most of you already understand how solar works, but just in case you didn't, these are kind of the main components in the process of solar photovoltaic energy and the conversion devices. So in essence, the solar collection system, the solar modules, they convert solar energy into DC electricity. That DC electricity is then converted into AC electricity via inverters. And that AC electricity is stepped up with transformers to the distribution voltage. And from there, it goes to residential and commercial consumers alike. So here's a site plan of the project. As I said, it is a 15-acre development on a 40-acre tract, and it is the 15 southernmost acres of this tract, again owned by Norman Public Schools. I also showed a picture on the right of the view looking south from East Robinson Street, just to give you kind of a sense of it. The site has pretty interesting topography. It sort of slopes upward and then downward. So although I think these projects are pretty cool looking, you actually likely won't see it from East Robinson Street just due to the topography. I put a few pictures in here of other projects that we own and operate, just to give those who haven't seen similar projects kind of a sense of what these things look like. So here's a single access tracking system in California. So this is pretty close to what it's going to look like in Norman, although you'll probably have more grass, I would suspect, below the panels. Here's another single axis tracking system, and here's kind of a ground level shot of it. This one's in Minnesota. Here's another close up. This is a close up of the tracker motor, but give you also kind of a perspective, kind of the close up ground view of what these things look like. You can see the back of the modules on the left, and of course the front on the right, and then you're looking straight down at a tracker motor. I have a few things to highlight from our engineering and environmental team. Typically, when we do these presentations in person, they're with me, and I usually allow them to kind of present their materials. But in the spirit of kind of streamlining and making things efficient, I'll cover their materials as well. Just a few notes. Usually questions come up regarding stormwater runoff, so and what the impact of our development is on stormwater runoff. The post development runoff is only negligibly higher than kind of the runoff pre-development coefficient from 0.35 up to 0.36. So pretty negligible. Most of that is attributable to just the development of the driveway or the road going down into our solar project. And sort of an interesting point about the road or the driveway is it's intended to be used by Norman Public Schools in the future if they do decide to build a new school there. So either way, that road actually would be there, and it kind of serves two purposes, which is great. And of course, that road or the driveway I alluded to will be designed, in compliance with all City of Norman requirements, and sufficiently so for emergency personnel to access it as needed. Here's just a drainage map of the pre-development runoff flows. for the most part, water's runoff flows away from our subject tract anyway. And then just to highlight a few things from the environmental front that are very important to highlight. Now, in addition to adhering to all the conditions of any special use permit and any other applicable building or electrical code incorporated by the city, and of course, in compliance with any OEC requirements to maintain safety, we will also be compliant with applicable environmental law. For one, we are and will be compliant with the Endangered Species Act. We had an environmental consultant who works for us conducted a survey on the site and found no threatened or endangered species habitats. Similarly, we will be compliant with the Clean Water Act regarding jurisdictional wetlands. There are no jurisdictional wetlands on this site, though there are a few ponds. Regardless, our development will not impact those ponds. And last, we are and will be compliant with the Bald and Gold Eagle Protection Act. And so my last slide here is just to drive home a few of the benefits of the project. So obviously you're, in improving this project, you're promoting clean renewable energy, which is pollution-free, it's safe, and it's quiet. The project will generate clean renewable energy sufficient to serve approximately 400 homes of folks in the city of Norman. As I alluded to, the land is owned by Norman Public Schools, so the educational value of the project is very important to them, as it is other stakeholders of the project. The project will be showcased, and tours will be provided to students and other interested folks in the community, those who want to learn about solar energy or electricity in general. And then shifting gears to some of the economic benefits, which I think is very important. Really, it's important anytime, but certainly as you're battling a COVID-19 pandemic, which kind of is a gut shot to really every city. So Norman isn't unique there. We care about the economic, the positive economic impacts. So we will be able to create a few jobs during construction. The construction period of a project like this isn't very long. It's about 3 to 4 months. But we do tend to use local subcontractors and other professional services. And of course, anybody who is not local will be coming from out of town and staying in hotels and supporting restaurants and other local businesses. So that's certainly helpful. And then, on the tax revenue front, which is also very important to highlight, the project, the capital purchase will have sales tax on certain equipment. And then I think even more notable than the sales tax is the property tax revenue. The project should have we anticipate a 30-year useful life, if not more. But over the course of 30 years, we expect to generate approximately $700,000 worth of property tax revenues. Again, it's not a huge project. 2-megawatt project is approximately a $3 million investment in your community. So it's certainly no silver bullet for kind of the challenges that the city is facing. Like I said, as every other city, county across the country is facing. But I think it certainly helps. It doesn't hurt. It helps, and it's a pleasure to invest in your community. And thank you for giving me the chance to speak with you all tonight. Happy to take any questions as well.
Thank you so much for that presentation. It was very well done, very informative. And I, at this time, want to publicly thank OEC and Norman Public Schools as well for their roles in this. Quick question that I have, and I don't know if you can answer this. Is someone from Norman Public Schools on the call?
I don't think so.
Okay. We had previously discussed perhaps More Norman Technology Center. That's one of our kind of career tech places in the area. Possibly partnering as well, because the goal would be that as jobs are created in the renewable energy industry, they're going to have to practice somewhere. So I would love to throw that out there, and I don't know what that looks like, but I wanted to make sure that was on the radar.
Sure.
And any comment on that?
I don't specifically have any comment on that. I'll just say that, you know, all the stakeholders I've been working with on this project, Norman Public Schools and OEC have been spectacular, and they are, you know, highly invested in, you know, in the educational value in the renewable economy. So I'll just say that generally.
Okay. And then the other one that I had was you said the project will generate clean renewable energy sufficient to serve approximately 400 homes. I had, again, probably a question for Norman Public Schools. I thought this was going towards Norman Public Schools to help them offset their energy costs.
So I can speak to the scope that I know. So DG Central 1 is the long-term owner and operator of the project. Now we have a contract to sell our energy, and we sell it to actually Western Farmers Electric Cooperative, and then Western Farmers in turn sells it to OEC, and that's with a separate contracting relationship that NextEra Energy Resources is not party to. Beyond that, similarly, I also don't know specifically what OEC's plans are in terms of any kind of community solar programs or anything like that. Generally, the project is interconnected directly into the grid, so the electrons they go to kind of whatever the nearest load is. So that's really all I can speak to. Again, we're not party to what Western Farmers does with OEC, and then what OEC in turn does with any of their their customers down the road.
Okay, well, thanks for taking a shot at that. I know that this is OEC's second kind of solar farm, and I'm excited to see Norman Public Schools embracing the possibilities of solar energy in terms of education. And again, hopefully we can get more Norman in there if they bring on teaching technicians, as we pivot hopefully from oil to energy, renewable energy, that that could be a training ground as well. But that is all that I have. I know that other council members have questions. Councilmember Wilson.
All right, so I love this project. Thank you so much, Mr. Siegelstein. Am I saying that correctly?
Pretty close, Siegelstein. No worries.
All right. Well, you say my name right, I'll say yours. But I'm just kidding. I have a few questions. Mostly, I love this project, so don't take any of these weird. I just want to ask questions that I know that I would probably get. Why did I approve this project? So my first question was, I know that the way that renewable energy works, it just kind of goes into a pool. It's all energy once it gets there, right? How does Norman Public Schools benefit from this project? I'm a little confused about how they're even involved other than the land ownership.
Well, certainly the land ownership is one. They do collect annual revenues from the land lease payments. And from my vantage, again, I really only have kind of the relationship with OEC to a certain extent, as they're sort of our landlord, and then Norman Public Schools is landlord to OEC. So there's more sort of outside of my scope. But of course, they collect revenues. They will benefit from the educational value, the tours, and those are kind of the two main ones that come to mind.
Okay, so my next question is, thank you, by the way.
Sure.
My next question is, how do these kind of solar farms affect wildlife? And you talked about the eagles, golden and bald eagles. We have lots of refuge out there, but we have deer and all kinds of other wildlife. So what's the effect on the wildlife?
I mean, there really isn't any material adverse effects on wildlife. For example, animals can go underneath our perimeter fence. It's not there to keep animals out, it's there to keep people out. So if an animal did want to traverse our project, they certainly can. We're not removing any habitats. We're not disrupting any the ponds or any other streams or waterways. So we have no impact on wildlife.
Okay, cool. I have another, this is kind of a weird question and it may be completely way off base, but is there any effect to those solar panels in aviation? The air above? Your face is telling me that's a wacky question.
I'm not,
and I'm
well,
okay with that.
I want to make sure I understand it. Oh, you mean for like planes that are flying over it, like glare?
Right, planes that are
okay.
flying over, because I know we have some aviation activity out there, so I just was
Sure.
curious if that had any effect, and I don't know.
Yeah, so when we develop projects closer to airports, there are additional studies we have to do. This is sufficiently far away from airports that it doesn't apply. But I'll also say that the modules or the panels, especially over the years, we use technology to coat the panels, or I shouldn't say we do, but the manufacturers of the panels, they use a coating that sort of prevents it from or minimizes any glare. Because if you think about it, light that bounces off of the panels is energy that's wasted. So it's actually designed to absorb light instead of reflect light.
Okay.
So it'll have no impact on planes flying overhead. And if we were closer to an airport, we would do studies that prove that out.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. I know it's a kind of a wacky question, but I do have one guy out there that flies very close to there. And so I just was curious. And then for our city staff, I have a couple of questions. One is more of a, I think I know the answer, but I want it to be on record. Sean O'Leary, are you available to talk? I'm curious what an average home built on this same site would maybe displace in the way of water. He mentioned his stormwater runoff was a negligible change because of these panels, but if we were to instead build a house that would be allowable by the current zoning, what would that maybe create? Do you have an idea?
Yes, Councilor, I can relate it to the numbers that he shared regarding this. He talked about the coefficient of runoff there, the point, I think it's 0.35 to 0.36.
0.36, yeah.
A typical grass area like this would be about a 0.2 to start with, and it would go to about a 0.4 for a single family home development. So it's in the same range, I guess, of pre and post development runoff.
Okay, so we're not creating a bigger situation. Okay, that's what I wanted
Actually
to
less,
know.
right, slightly less.
Absolutely. And then I had one more question. Oh, this is a zoning question. And this is something I actually know the answer to, but I just want to get it kind of talked about. If this facility moves and you say it's got a 30-year life, what happens to this special use? It's a special use permit we're asking for, right? Jane, are you on here?
I'm here.
There you are.
There I am.
Oh, okay. So what happens, so we all know, what happens if these guys either don't do the project or do the project, end the project and move on? What happens to this space?
So the special use would stay with the property for 2 years. After that time, it would essentially expire. So if another company wanted to come in, they could take over the special use.
Okay.
But if it stayed vacant, the use was not continuous, then after a 2-year period, it would expire.
Okay, then one other question, I think Jane may be the proper person to answer this. This special use is only for what he's asking for, solar only, right? We're not able to just go, oh, we think we want to change the project and put wind in there. That would be probably problematic out there. So tell me about that, Jane.
I was just reading real quick.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just had to grab the the agenda. So this says that grant special use for a public utility. So it does not say for the specific solar panels. And if Brenda wants to, or Catherine wants to correct me on any of that, but the what I'm seeing in the title, it says grant special use for a public utility.
Okay. Catherine, do you have any comments on that?
That is correct. Further down in the ordinance, it says the site shall be developed in accordance with the site plan and supporting documentation. So although the public utility designation is broad, it would still have to be developed in accordance with the site plan.
And the site plan specifies solar?
My copy's a little fuzzy, but it appears to.
Yes, it does.
Shows solar.
Yeah, WFEC solar project in the bottom right-hand side.
Okay, so we couldn't replace that with an oil well or a wind turbine or anything like that?
Not without modifying the special use if it is not already allowed in this zoning.
And then that would have to come to council, am I correct?
If it's a special use, yes.
Okay. I think that's all my questions. Thank you, guys.
Councilmember Bierman.
So I also just want to reiterate how much I like this project, and also wanted to echo Mayor Clark's desire to get some kind of training program at some point down here at Moore Norman Tech. There are a couple community colleges in Oklahoma City that do solar photovoltaic technician training, but there aren't many, and from what I can tell, there is none for any renewable energy here in Norman. We certainly know that renewable energy is not new to the state, and they're constantly needing people to help maintain them. So I don't know who we have to talk to get that done. Maybe some of these students who are going to be learning about solar energy through Norman Public Schools will be interested in doing that. And that was my third question that I had written down before the start of the presentation. I was hoping that there was going to be some educational connection with Norman Public Schools, and I really like seeing that there's going to be tours and curriculum built around it. So thank you for bringing this to us. I'm really excited about it, and I look forward to seeing it go up.
Thank you.
Councilmember Scanlon.
When this project was first announced by Norman Public Schools, Councilmember Patron and I asked to meet with OEC and Norman Public Schools to talk about this, because we saw this as the beginning of some maybe great things for renewable energy in Norman. So we met with the aforementioned parties, and among other discussion points was what was the relationship. Turns out that all but one of the Norman Public Schools is on OG&E lines. But what happens with this particular arrangement is that OEC will take the electricity and sell it, but the pass-through is back to Norman Public Schools. So Norman Public Schools is making money that will help them pay their OG&E electric bill, or whatever they choose to spend it on. But it nonetheless is going to contribute to renewable power in and around Norman. As a footnote, and it's I think a follow-on from this, there have been some very preliminary discussions, and city manager is better able to talk to this, but some preliminary discussions about other solar farms in town that might provide power directly to the city to offset, for example, power requirements of the water reclamation facility. Those discussions had started when the virus descended, and they've been held in abeyance, as I understand it, pending coming out from under the current crisis. But there is more to come on this kind of thing, and I think it's all very positive.
Okay, Councilmember Patron.
So yes, I was just going to kind of make some of those same comments as Councilmember Scanlon, and also to follow up that with only having the one line that goes to OEC's grid, OG&E hasn't been as workable with renewable energy. And so OEC kind of stepped up to the plate and said, look, we have an idea, because their goal was to start working towards RF 100. And so they said, look, here's an idea of offsetting your OG&E fossil fuel usage by supplying renewables to the surrounding area out in the country. So I thought it was really a creative way to try to bring their fossil fuel usage down to I don't know if it's necessarily effective zero, but it's a lot what they're generating out there. I mean, this was right around Halloween when Councilmember Scanlon and I went to this meeting, so I don't remember the exact amount of, I'm sure Mr. Siegelstein, I hope I said that correctly, could tell us how many kilowatt hours or whatever it generates, but it's a lot. And I think he said, Councilmember Scanlon, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed to me that it is enough power to generate entire Norman North, and I don't know, it was a high school and I thought an elementary school as well, but.
That's the example that they used, but of course, what we've heard here is that this is enough to power, 2 megawatts, I think we heard, enough to power about 400 houses. So
that's right.
That
awesome.
I think is good.
And then the other, I'm very excited about this project too, by the way. And a related conversation, I'm wondering if anyone can tell me if we've heard any updates on the working with the state on how our homes can get the solar as well. And I don't necessarily need an answer to that right away, but I definitely want to make sure that we're getting that ball rolling, because getting solar panels in town has just been a nightmare apparently. So I'm really hoping that we can get that alleviated, because it's kind of silly. But anyway, yeah, I'm really excited about this, and I hope that helped to answer some of the questions.
Thank you.
Okay, Mayor, I don't see any other council comments. I do believe there are some public comments that Annalise Meyer will read into the record if you're ready for that.
Are we ready for public comments?
Okay, Mayor, I don't see any other council comments.
No, yes, good. We are ready.
Okay, great. We have a couple comments from the public. Evan Alexander says, love what they're doing. George Emmerling says, Norman could use this. It seems like it is not much land, and MPS could still use the rest of the land if they need to. That's all the public comments.
Okay. All right. Well, if that is it for public comment, are there any final comments from council regarding this item? Please raise your hand if you have a final comment.
Seeing none, Mayor.
Okay, the motion on the floor is to adopt the ordinance on second reading. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Bierman.
Aye.
Councilmember Carter.
Aye.
Councilmember Patron.
Aye.
Councilmember Hall.
Aye.
Councilmember Wilson.
Yes.
Councilmember Scanlon.
Aye.
Councilmember Holman.
Yes.
Councilmember Scott.
Yes.
Mayor Clark.
Yes.
The ordinance is adopted upon second reading unanimously.
I will now entertain a motion to adopt the ordinance on final reading.
Second.
The motion on the floor is to adopt the ordinance on final reading. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Bierman.
Aye.
Councilmember Carter.
Aye.
Councilmember Patron.
Aye.
Councilmember Hall.
Aye.
Councilmember Wilson.
Yes.
Councilmember Scanlon.
Aye.
Councilmember Holman.
Yes.
Councilmember Scott.
Yes.
Mayor Clark.
Yes.
The ordinance is adopted upon final reading unanimously.
Item 18, ordinance 1920-43, closing a platted 47.18-foot pedestrian easement along the west boundary of lots 23 and 24, Block 1, Carrington Place Addition, Section 5, 3812 and 3816 Dalston Circle. I'll entertain a motion to adopt or reject the ordinance on second reading, section by section.
Motion to adopt.
Second.
Okay. We now have a presentation from Ryan Knowles, the applicant.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I've got a PowerPoint. Let me make sure I can get this up here. You can't see that. Can you see the PowerPoint? Yes. You might enlarge it a little bit. Much better.
Okay, so what we are asking is vacating of a pedestrian easement and talking with the developer of the neighborhood. Originally, they had plans to utilize this easement, and then as they started to develop, the plans changed. So they didn't remove the easement out of my backyard, my neighbor's backyard, but they said that they would not challenge if we wanted to have that removed. It eats up about 47 feet of the backyard space. So as you can see, the highlighted yellow space reflects where that easement is. It does not, that easement does not impede any of the public area. This is looking, facing south from Franklin Road, where the fence is. The brick fence is just the other side of the properties that we're referring to. This pond here, then you can see our backyards just to the other side of that. There's already a built-in walking path, pedestrian area there that is not affected. The drainage area between our two homes, this was a picture before our home was built. It still will be open. We will not be impeding that in any way. This is looking from my backyard into the neighbor's backyard, and you can see the open area that sits in that easement that we are asking to be vacated. The metal fencing was put up by the developer, so that will not be moved in any way. There's just another look. You can see the retainage, the pond and the walking path back behind. As far as slides, that's all I have. If there's any questions. All right. Thank you so much for that presentation. Are there any questions from council regarding this item?
I don't see any, Mayor.
All right, this is an opportunity for members of the public to make comments regarding this item. Are there any public comments coming in via social media?
No, Mayor, there are no public comments.
All right, this is an opportunity for final comment from council regarding this item.
We have Councilmember Holman. Actually, sorry, moved around on me there.
Unmute now. Okay. Ready? Okay.
And then
Yeah. So just one question, really. I'm looking at it on the satellite view, and it looks like a drain. Is that a drainage ditch between your two houses, or is that a sidewalk?
I think it's a drainage. It's also used as a sidewalk, but it is a drainage.
And this easement doesn't have anything to do with access to that, I assume?
No, we would not be impeding that whatsoever.
Wonderful. That's all I got. Thank you.
Are there any other final comments from council regarding this item?
Seeing no other comments, Mayor.
All right, the motion on the floor is to adopt the ordinance on second reading. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Bierman.
Aye.
Councilmember Carter. Councilmember Carter. Come back to him. Councilmember Patron.
Aye. Aye.
Okay,
Aye.
good.
Aye.
Councilmember Patron.
Aye.
Councilmember Hall.
Aye.
Councilmember Wilson.
Yes.
Councilmember Scanlon.
Aye.
Councilmember Holman.
Brenda, just a point of order real quick. I'm looking at the YouTube live feed, and some folks are commenting that it's lagging. So by the time you closed public comment, it hadn't actually appeared on the video yet.
They should be making their comments
From what I'm reading, so.
following the chat, opening and closing the chats.
Do you wanna just
Open it and close it in the chat ahead of time so that it is in line with the actual meeting and not what's on the video.
Well, while they're figuring that out,
Otherwise,
I'm
we sit here
comfortable
for-
with allowing public comment.
What they're saying is if you need to open it in the chat so that it's real time on the video instead of waiting.
Okay. I hope if everybody listening follows that. So, but for me on the vote, but thanks for just what I'm reading here on that. Thanks.
Councilmember Scott,
Yes.
Mayor Clark.
Yes.
The
I'm
ordinance
fine.
is
I'm fine with
adopted.
hearing the comments. I don't think anyone else would mind. We're a little out of order. Is that still possible? I mean, I doubt we might have to redo it, but
There are no comments. The only comments are that there's a lag.
no. Got it. Okay. Go ahead, Brenda.
That ordinance was adopted upon second reading unanimously.
I will now entertain a motion to adopt or reject the ordinance on final reading.
Second.
The motion on the floor is to adopt the ordinance on final reading. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Bierman,
Aye.
Councilmember Clark,
Aye.
I mean, Councilmember Carter,
Okay.
I'm sorry. I'm looking at it.
Clark, I'm Carter. I'm yes.
Councilmember Patron,
Aye.
Clark.
Councilmember Hall,
Aye.
Councilmember Wilson,
Yep.
Councilmember Scanlon,
Aye.
Councilmember Holman,
Yes.
Councilmember Scott,
Yes.
Mayor Clark.
Yes.
The ordinance is adopted upon final reading unanimously. This is not
Final
as
item
easy
of-
as you think.
You're doing a great job, Brenda.
saying.
You are. All right. Our final item of the night, item 19, miscellaneous discussion. This is an opportunity for citizens to address city council, and remarks should be directed to the council as a whole.
Mayor, are you going to take, but that is the public comment part, right? Miscellaneous?
Yes.
This is the public comment time for miscellaneous. Okay, we're seeing none right now. If some come up while you're doing council comments, we can always circle back if you like.
Okay. Let's start with Ward 1. Councilor Bierman.
Go ahead and unmute yourselves as she calls your name, because sometimes it takes a while for me to find you.
No worries. So I know that information about the city's reopening plan is now starting to circulate. I've answered the same question about 30 times, but I've also answered a whole bunch of individual and interesting questions, and I know that there will be more. I know that there will be more information coming out. But I also just wanted to state that I know that there's a lot we don't know about this disease, about how we should proceed as a city, and about what the future looks like. And that's okay. We don't have to know everything right away. We reach for history like 1918 to guide us. And while we recognize that the world is different than 1918, treatments are different, life is different, we can only do the best we can with the information that we have. But I do know a few things. I know that I've received far more calls, Facebook messages, and emails concerned about the speed of reopenings than I have about opening faster. I have heard from employees that are scared. They're scared about losing their unemployment benefits if they're called back to work, but don't feel safe doing so. And frankly, those fears were confirmed today with some information that came out about state leaders trying to force the federal government to stop the federal unemployment payments in order to literally force employees back to work. I know that business owners feel pressured to reopen because the assistance programs available to them were not structured to keep businesses closed, and the rollouts of those programs were riddled with problems that are still happening today. I know that disinfectant and sanitizing supplies are not readily available to support a fast reopening of businesses in a safe way. I know that our state and federal safety nets and relief programs have failed you. They've failed all of us. The assistance programs available to business owners were not sufficient. A disturbing number of workers have yet to receive their state unemployment benefits, and self-employed people, gig workers, sole proprietors, their federal benefits are still not available to them. That is not a uniquely Oklahoma problem, but that doesn't make it less critical for those workers. And I know that that's one of the reasons why they are feeling so anxious right now. And lastly, I know there's going to be no perfect decision that every single resident is going to be happy with. Open too early and we risk more cases, more unnecessary deaths, and leaving higher risk residents to believe that their right to move about this city is less important than a healthy person's. Staying closed for longer when we know the state and federal support systems are inadequate risks the long-term stability of our local businesses and our entire local economy. But I have to say, I do expect a rebound of our curve. I do. It's not an indictment of Mayor Clark's leadership or decision making. I've been with her every single step of the way, and I would be glad to be proven wrong. And in the meantime, I will be continuing to shelter in place at home. I will not be going to the gym or eating at my favorite restaurants or getting my hair or nails done or going to the pool when it opens. And 2 of our businesses will not be opening on May 1st. And maybe not even opening for the second phase, depending on how things go. But I just want everyone to know that we think about all of these things. We take the best information that the health experts have to give us. We take the best information that we have about the impact that this is having on local businesses. And we can only do as much as we can do given the state and federal resources that have still not made its way to us. And so this might not be a quick move through the reopening. We'll have to wait and see. It's unfortunate that the impact of our decision making won't be felt for a couple weeks. That's just the way it is. When we reopen, we're not going to see a bounce in cases for a couple weeks if it's going to happen. So please, everyone, have patience. Please contact your state and federal representatives to tell them that what they have done has not been sufficient for you. And then continue to let us know how you're doing. We want to know, and that's the information that we use to guide us forward. And hopefully whatever models we can use now that the IHME model has started to cut off states that have started reopening, not only because they don't think it's safe, because it's hard to quantify what the long-term impact of that is going to be. So I enjoy seeing all of your faces, and hopefully we will be able to see each other safely in public sooner rather than later. And for the foreseeable future, you will continue to see me from here up with a mask. And if anyone needs a mask, please feel free to contact me. I have made almost 300 at this point. Thankfully, my Joann's order took 9 days to come through, but it came through. So now I have more fabric and can make more. And just continue to do the best you can and be kind to each other, please. I think the thing that has distressed me most in the last few days is how aggressive and nasty people in this community have become over this reopening plan. And it greatly disappoints me to see many names that I know fairly well engaging in those kinds of conversations too, because you are not keeping your conversations private. We all can see them.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Carter.
Oh, I'm Clark. Remember, I'm Clark. I know I'm cute, but I'm not that cute. All right. So, I'm a veterinarian, been seeing the public all through this thing. We've had 5 people on I think everybody thinks they've had this virus. We've had 5 people tested. Everyone's negative. I do think masks are important. Just keep doing that and maintain social distancing. And I think I'm optimistic, again, that it's all going to work out. And so a couple more thoughts about our economic development. I do like the idea that was brought up of keeping the management of the funds internal. I think, Mr. Pyle, this might be the great opportunity for you to formalize your economic strike team concept like you talked about back in your interviews that I fell in love with. Maybe in part of this funding is that you'll actually need a staff person, to do that. And, I just think that if you look, God, I'm a horse vet, but I mean, I just think through my history books, you know, most of the programs that were designed during economic downturns were designed at employment. If Norman is going to be facing a 20% unemployment, you've got the COVID effect and you've got the oil industry, and I don't see Saudi Arabia. I think Saudi Arabia and Russia are going for our jugular vein. So I don't see them backing off, and it seems like we're going to probably have that. So, you know, what about hiring 50 people at $15 an hour if they're unemployed and put them to work beautifying Norman? I don't know if that qualifies for the public work projects. Like we see, you go around town, you see the WPA stickers on all kinds of things. I rode my bike 15 miles through Norman yesterday, and I don't know how many of the sidewalks were WPA projects, but you know, public works projects, beautifying Norman, anything that takes people from unemployment to employment, even if it's a temporary bridge situation. You hear about Councilmember Wilson and I were both learned the term gig workers, you know, people that live by getting gigs. And so Uber drivers, vouchers for Uber drivers, you know, I don't know, things like that. I'm part of a business that puts on horse shows all around the country, and we're putting on our first horse show in Scottsdale, Mother's Day weekend after next, and we're putting on another one in Katy, Texas, down by Houston the last weekend in May. And you know, we've canceled horse shows for the last 2 months that have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars effect on local economies. I know that we have events in our city that have been postponed. You know, are there ways that we can use our economic stimulus, you know, money locally to help augment the, say, Norman Music Festival, supply them with resources so that they can attract groups that would attract, you know, bigger named artists, for example, the Medieval Fair. I'm sure Teresa at the Norman Roundup Club, right now we should be having a rodeo, but we're not having a rodeo. Maybe we'll have one by the 4th of July. You know, 4th of July is a traditional rodeo season. Anything to offset, you know, the losses that they've incurred, you know, overhead expenses and employing staff, all of that kind of stuff, things to augment purses and things that are used to drive people to compete or attend these events. Again, you know, under all the proper social distancing and biosecurity protocols. So that's what I have to say about that. And say I've only got 4 city council meetings left. So I'm on my farewell tour, and part of my farewell tour is I sent everyone an email about one of my favorite things that I'm probably going to be talking a little bit about, and I'm not going to talk much more tonight, but I just wanted to fill you in on one of my favorite birds, which is the least tern. Okay, and I've got a little pretty picture of him, a picture of his eggs, if you want to pull up your email, with a little chick. And so just to let you know what a least tern is, it's a small tern that generally feeds on fish. And one of the cool things about the least tern is that they have a real unusual mating behavior where the male least tern courts the female least tern, generally with a fish in his mouth. And so that kind of stuff you can't see everywhere, this kind of courtship behavior, things like that. There's a map that I sent you that the red dots, which is pretty much all of Oklahoma, is the threatened habitat area. You can see how much habitat in Oklahoma. These terns migrate from South America to North America to Oklahoma in the summer, and they nest on the South Canadian River. And I want to direct you to this last paragraph this is the part that I've been involved with quite a bit, is that Environmental Protection Agency funded, and I'm not sure that's still going on, part of their wildlife diversity program, they partnered with the University of Oklahoma Biological Survey to protect and monitor the interior least tern. Now, when these birds went on the endangered species list, they were down to 2,000, and now we're up to 18,000 of these birds in North America now. So it's been a real success story. In fact, I think they're trying to take them off the endangered species list. But what students, OU students would do is they would go out, and I helped do this quite a bit, and we would flag and mark off these nesting areas along the river bottom, just right here south of town. I mean, just right here south of town, basically in this area of the South Canadian River Park, which is the whole point of me talking here tonight, is that when this South Canadian River Park project was included in the Norman Forward, one of the important components in my mind was that we were going to have habitat preservation for lease turn. And I think about that tower there on Main Street behind the old car dealership, the Mitsubishi that's now a medical marijuana or whatever. We have a tower like that out there in this park where students and kids could actually, from a safe distance, observe actually an endangered species right here in our city limits. Multiplying and growing and preserving, I think, would be just a wonderful experience for children. I think it'd be an ecotourism is a big thing. These are just things that I think we can do, where we can blend economic development with the environment, with education, with college students, multi-generational, lots of good stuff. I'm done. Back to you, Mayor.
Thank you, council member. I do admire your passion. Councilmember Patron.
So Councilmember Carter, your farewell tour reminded me of "This Is Where the Cowboy Rides Away." Know that song? Yeah. Anyway, so I guess to backtrack a little bit, I had said that during miscellaneous comments, I wanted to talk about my thoughts on the economic stimulus bond or whatever package. And so from that conversation, my original questions pulling away from that is, what is our ultimate goal here? And I think Councilmember Carter was speaking to this as well. Is it similar to the Paycheck Protection Program, in that we're wanting to get money into the hands of workers and not have them lose their jobs? Or is it lost profits? Is it innovation? What exactly would it be that what is our goal, and what are we trying to accomplish? And in knowing that, would the applicants then be giving us their plan, us meaning the city? Because once again, I agree with Councilmember Carter and Councilmember Hall and Councilmember Bierman and somebody else I think spoke to this, Holman, I think, that I believe it should be a city project. And so would they be, whether not necessarily council members, but it would be housed within the city instead of an outside agency. So would they be coming with their application to say, this is how I satisfy, this is what I'm going to do with this money? And then the next side of that would be, with it being an internal, I agree with the other council members who've spoken to the oversight component being incredibly important, because if we've learned anything from the PPP and its SBA counterparts, transparency is extremely important. A huge part of the discussions have been what companies and what sizes of companies have received these dollars. And it's very important to people that they're able to know where their tax money is going. So, so that was part of that. And then I was wondering from Ms. Kaplan, and she can answer it another time, how she sees these being, like, how does it get the stamp of approval? So I was thinking along at that point in time on Councilmember Bierman's comments that if there is a certain businesses that are having difficulty receiving federal funding, whether it's for credit reasons or the type of business that they're in, et cetera, how Ms. Kaplan would see that approval process take place, and how conversations would there be a committee be put together that with council member liaisons on the committee, or would this be solely something that city staff would take care of? I would to discuss each application. I feel like that these are the community coming together to really boost up the types of businesses that there are holes in Norman for types of employment. There's a lot of $2.13 an hour employment. There's not a whole lot of employment for grads. So that are in different types of industries. So I just would like for us to see it more as an opportunity that we are able to have like a steering committee, maybe. I don't know, I'm kind of thinking out loud here, but for specific industries that we would want to bolster. And then are there going to be any types of companies that we're saying, you know what, we don't want to give dollars to chain stores, to Wall Street, or if you don't actually live here, you just happen to have a business here, but what about those? I mean, I think these kinds of discussions are really important to be had because they do go right back to where we were talking before, or I was talking before, in people wanting to know where their tax dollars are spent, because it is frustrating to say, well, we have under 500 employees, we're Walmart, and we only have 150 in that Walmart. Okay, that's not exactly what we meant by under 50 employees or what, you see what I'm saying? So there are loopholes that I want to make sure that we don't have exploitation of the people's money. And then before I had said, I had reached out to a former council member and asked, he was speaking about some, well, I'd be backtracking a little bit, and what we were talking about was vulnerable people in our community, and how that this is not, if we look at this right now, unemployment, yes, there was an extra $600 if you were not in gig work and could actually get the payments that were meant for you. Under the CARES Act, those gig workers should have already gotten their money. And I know that Councilmember Carter and I have both received a telephone call from a woman that has just continued to weigh on my heart. And we need to understand that there are people right now that literally don't know where they're going to get their next meal. I mean, they were in the gig economy, and that CARES Act money, which is our federal tax dollars, was meant for them, and it has not made it into their pocket, so they can't go to the grocery store. So there are many, many people in our community for who that is the case, not just small business owners. So it's not just small business owners, is where I'm coming around to this, that are not knowing how they're going to pay their rent. They don't know how they're going to pay their electric bill, and they don't know when they're going to be back into an economy that actually can, that their gig work that they were in prior can support those expenses again. And so what my thought here was, and after having spoken with him, he had a few different ways of thinking about how can we get dollars into their hands. And it seems to me that it could also be a coupled program with this small business recovery fund, so that we're actually taking more of a stimulus branch of it as well, because just because you have money going into small business owners' hands doesn't mean that their business is going to do going to continue to thrive if you don't have dollars in the economy that can be spent in those businesses. So yes, they might have an initial capital infusion, but as any small business owner knows, the initial amount money that you're getting from the feds to keep your employees on the payroll until June doesn't keep the doors open if there are not customers coming in and actually spending money in your brick and mortar or whatever kind of business you run. So what if we were to look at, rather than waiting 4 months for the bond to pass, what if we were to sit down and try to work with a few different problems that we have at the exact same time, which is, I don't know, a potential appeal on a TIF where there is $13 million sitting in an account. And most of that in that area is retail. And I'm pretty sure that they don't want to lose those tenants to a really bad economy. I'm pretty sure a whole lot of people probably work in there. So the thought would be maybe that we could use the program to boost the whole community's economic development. Maybe we could avoid an appeal if they would be workable, to sitting down and having a new project plan that goes to save rents, that people in our community could have back rent paid. And maybe we would do something like 75% or 80% of whatever that rent was, and the other part is forgiven. If the city would, with taxpayer dollars, TIF money, that's from the people in this community, those are tax dollars, for their utilities, their rent, and then money for the groceries, so that we can get people back on their feet again and get people's businesses, the other branch being small business, go into what we were talking about before, the same with the economic recovery package. So instead of upping people's property tax, this is so weird seeing all of your faces and talking like this. Instead of upping people's property tax bill, we use funds that are already sitting in an account, which happens to be more than twice the amount of what we're even talking about. So your council members, project plans are within your wheelhouse. That's what you do when it comes to TIFs. So it's something that we could also have the full sales tax going back into our budget. If we got everybody sit down and come up with something that everybody can live with and maybe solve some problems at the same time. If no one's interested in actually using that for our people or our companies, there were another couple of ideas that he had. One is that he said he said, first I would look at the net revenue stabilization fund. If you transferred funds from the general fund to create an emergency assistance fund, you could replace those funds with funds from the net revenue stabilization fund. So that was one idea. The second was tip dollars as well. At this point in time, we were just talking about the vulnerable people in our community, but I believe it goes with small business owners as well. And then let's see, the next was the PSST ordinance contained language specifically authorizing diversion of funds to the general fund to provide services directly to citizens. So we wouldn't have to do anything to change on that right there. And then lastly, any capital project that is slated to be paid for with sales taxes other than capital 0.7, so the capital penny, as Mr. Francisco loves for us to call it, could be shifted to a go bond, assuming the project isn't an emergency. And I think we've already been talking about this. And the sales tax funds diverted to an emergency assistance. He said you especially would look at the projects and enterprise funds. And again, I think we have been talking about that somewhat already, but I'm just asking that for us to think about where is the money now. And because there are a lot of people in our community that need those dollars now. And we haven't really been speaking to those vulnerable people yet. We've just been speaking about small business owners. And then a final comment that I would make off of that topic from before is what are the things that I have seen, and I haven't been on Facebook as much here recently, just because it's been a lot of conversation about what I kept seeing is data points that whether it's hospitalization rates or testing positive rates or death counts. And I keep seeing these numbers, and I'm sure you all have too, in the form of graphs, whether it's the governor or, you know, all across the country, all the way here to locally and people in our own community putting graphs together and, oh, look, it's not that bad, or, oh, look, it's this many people or whatever. And I guess what it seems to be continuing to kind of tear at my heart is that every time you see one of those graphs and you see a bullet point or you see a number, when we're talking about here in Oklahoma and here in Cleveland County and here in Norman, those are our neighbors. So I don't know about you all, but I actually do know someone who has passed away from this. But you don't have to just die to be feeling the effects of this for a very long time. And so when you see someone who's constantly talking about this in the form of numbers, it's likely because they don't know yet that they do know people. They don't realize it yet, but there are faces behind every single one of those bar graphs and bullet point and numbers that's one of your neighbors. And it's, I don't know, but it's just been really hard for me personally to watch, to see that it's become so depersonalized that it's just been a bar graph. And I just would really encourage everyone, just keep that in mind, because I have friends who have had to leave some of these board groups because they can't stand to see it spoken about like that anymore, because you're talking about their family member and minimizing the heartbreak that they've been through. So just, Norman's bigger than that. Norman's better than that. And I know that no one really means to be, they're not trying to be ugly about it. That's not at all what I'm trying to get at. I just want to make sure that we're all sensitive to the conversations that we're having. This community is not really all that big, and it's experienced quite a bit of loss. So that's all I have. I hope everybody stays well. I'm excited to see you all soon.
Thank you, council member. Councilmember Hall.
So one of the advantages of having 9 people who serve on our council is the creativity of thought and how we each approach solving our problems in our community in different ways. So I really appreciate everything that Councilmember Patron just said, and have given me some things to really think about in the short term, which was one of the things I mentioned earlier. The business recovery package is not until August, and I'm intrigued with what are our options to move forward in some ways now. So appreciate her creative thinking on this. And we had a big announcement today from Mayor Clark, and we're taking a big step as a community on May 1st as we transition to phase 1A. And I couldn't say it much better than Councilmember Bierman already has, other than to emphasize that no matter what we do, this virus is going to continue to be with us for the foreseeable future. So I really hope that everybody please take all the recommended precautions, including getting used to wearing masks or facial coverings when you're out in public. And remember that using masks is your way of protecting others from you, and vice versa. So this is a habit that I think we all need to embrace as we move forward in all of these transitioning plans. And please continue to support our local businesses, our local restaurants, our nonprofits, as they work hard on their reopening plan, because they're going to need to make that plan to protect their employees, to protect their customers. So I hope we can all be patient as they begin to move through phase 1 and 2 and 3. And everyone, as Councilmember Bierman already mentioned, is going to have their own standard of when they are comfortable putting their employees in front of the public. And we need to respect how they move about going through those phases. The other thing I want to just keep pounding on is make sure to complete your census form. This is one of the best ways that you can help the city of Norman going forward, and in so many other ways. Having a robust census in 2020 is going to be so important to our future. So please, if you haven't done it, it's so easy. So please fill out your census form. I also want to thank all of the Ward 4 residents that I've heard from. I've heard from so many of you. I encourage you to please continue to reach out and share your thoughts and concerns as we move forward. We have so many big issues that we're trying to tackle. We keep changing topics from week to week, but we're all trying to do the best that we can and make the best decisions for our community going forward. And I also want to say, in response to Councilmember Patron, I really resonate with what you're saying about it's easy to get distracted by data points and graphs and decreasing trajectories and everything else. And it is really personal for so many people in our community. And the first Cleveland County death was actually a really good friend and neighbor of mine. So take care of each other, be kind, be patient as we move through this. And I hope everyone has a good evening and stay from the storm.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Wilson.
Thank you. So to the Ward 5 folks, there's no ward meetings until the fall, probably, realistically. But I would like to tell everybody about a project I'm working on with Chief Foster and Major Teicher with the Norman PD, which is a crime prevention town hall that we're trying to figure out how to do in an appropriate way. We're having a pretty significant, we've kind of always being rural, have some weird like mail theft and some things like that, but we have a little organized crime ring happening out there that we I feel like Norman PD has worked to thwart in the superhero terms, but I feel like as a community we really have to do some significantly different things to protect ourselves and our property out there. So we're going to organize some Norman PD and hopefully the Sheriff's Department. I haven't talked to those guys yet, but I know that they'll be excited to help us on this. And we're going to have to be innovative in this and probably do it via Zoom. So Ward 5, you guys think of some people you want to send on a Zoom call with me and some local law enforcement folks to really answer our questions about how to appropriately protect our property and what our rights are and what we need to be doing out there. I've had great responses from Chief Foster on this, and I think we can find some solutions. I know that we have some folks tackling people and that sort of thing out there, so be careful, Ward 5. And you know, take care of each other. And on that take care of each other note, I would like to extend that to more of a social media place, because man, we can get some road ragey folks out there on the social media, and I'm hoping that we all during this time show each other grace. It is a time of uncertainty. There's not one person on this call right now who has been through a global pandemic before that I know of, unless, I don't know, Stephen, maybe you have the most historic knowledge, but I don't think you were here in 1918. So we are all figuring this out and trying to do the right thing for our citizens, for our employees. I co-own 4 businesses, and 2 of them are shut down, even though we don't have to shut them down, but it's the best thing for our clients and our employees. They're, you know, the animal businesses are still essential, but we couldn't figure out a way to do that without harming our employees or our clients. So the best thing for us to do was to shut that down, and we've lost about $100,000 in revenue. So it's not like I'm saying this from some place of no knowledge. Like, I know what this is costing you business owners. I know, because it has cost me $100,000, and I haven't received a paycheck in 6 weeks. And I've spent 11 years building these businesses. And, you know, I was getting kind of comfortable and fat and sassy up there. And all of a sudden I'm having to figure out things on a different level. So in that, I also want to say that I really appreciate the steady leadership of Mayor Clark on this. She doesn't know. She wasn't here in 1918 unless she's magic. She's doing this through a lens of discernment with the information given as it's being given. So I also want to really hammer how disappointed I am with some of our business leaders in this community that have participated in a Reopen Now Norman initiative that has been hateful and ugly and nasty and disgusting and horrifying. And I know who y'all are, and I promise you, I will remember. So maybe reel in your hate just a little bit and come together in this community and give each other a little grace and understand that we're all here trying to make these decisions for the best of everybody. There is not one person on this council, on city staff, that wants anybody to be harmed in this, that wants to push their personal agenda. I have not seen that from anybody. So send some love out to somebody, and I love you all. I wouldn't do this because this is not good for my health. I promise you. See those gray hairs? You people have caused these gray hairs. So I have personally made 265 calls to the unemployment commission over the last 6 weeks so that I can maybe get an unemployment check at some point. So I'm there with you. I'm walking in your boots. I know, and I'm losing money. And you know what? Those data points are people, and they're important people to somebody. So show some love, y'all. That's it.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Scanlon.
Two things. The Healthier at Home initiative was well-timed. As you all have, as we all have, I've gotten many, many calls on this issue. You got to open now, you better not open ever. And sometimes extreme comments backing up those particular viewpoints. I think we're a little bit forced into doing this by the mayor or the governor's proclamation and the decisions of cities around us. But I think given all of that, it was time, and I really like what I saw. The criteria are clear, the milestones are clear. And as far as I'm concerned, the most important phrase that runs through all of this is that when the gating criteria have been met, we'll go on. In other words, though there are dates mentioned, it's really event driven. And I think that most important of it all, because that keeps us from speeding. I appreciate the work that Mayor Clark has done. This may sound self-serving, but as having the kind of position in the military on two separate occasions, I understand you can get all the advice in the world, but the decision is yours to make and nobody else can do it for you. That's hard. That is very hard. And I really appreciate the spot that Mayor Clark has been in, and the grace and intelligence and good manners that she's demonstrated throughout all of this. So I appreciate that. Second item I would like to bring up. So one of the communities that's been isolated during this pandemic is the Veterans Center. A lot of people out there, they happen to be residents of Ward 6, so they're near and dear to my heart, and they're near and dear to my heart because I'm a veteran myself. To kind of open, let a little sunshine in their lives, the folks out there have sponsored some drive-by parades, the first of which was today. Mayor Clark led the parade. I was next in line. It took over 20 minutes for the cars that had marshaled in the Emmanuel Baptist Church parking lot to cross Robinson to get into the grounds of the Veterans Center to let them know that we care. And the idea was we would show them some love, we would go through, we would wave. I will tell you, as I went through, what I felt was the love coming back at me. I just thought it was so neat. These folks that have given so much are still giving in terms of their appreciation for the folks that took the time to drive by and say hi. And what we saw today was only a portion of the clientele out there. We're going to do this parade again tomorrow at 2 o'clock. And we're going to do it again on Thursday at 2 o'clock. And I would guess that the turnouts will be similar to what we saw today. So an example of Norman going out of its way to say thank you to some folks out there, but them saying thank you right back. It was quite an experience. And if you're not doing anything the next 2 days, whatever ward you happen to live in, 2 o'clock, marshal in the Emmanuel Baptist Church parking lots. Thank you all very much. I wish everybody good health. Stay safe.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Holman.
Thank you. I really agree with a lot of the comments from my colleagues tonight. All of you have made really great comments that I absolutely agree with. You know, on a personal note, you know, I have a regular day job at the Friendly Market, but many of you know that I also work one night a week at the deli, a bar on Campus Corner, as a door guy. The deli's been closed for over a month, and even in the phase plan, it wouldn't reopen till maybe mid-May or June. Thankfully for me, it is just a side gig that I do once a week, and I don't rely on it to pay my bills. But there are a couple of people that work there that do. That's their only job, and they are desperate. Thankfully, people that are supporters of the deli have donated money, and the owner of the deli has given that money out to the employees that need it. So I know for sure how people feel in this. I'm feeling it too. People that are close to me are impacted by this, but they also agree that they don't think it's wise to go just jumping back into everything right away. And they are concerned about their preparedness to do that and their own health and safety. Most people that work in the gig economy do not have health insurance. And I've mentioned this before. Councilmember Bierman has mentioned that even if you do have health insurance, it can still be very costly. But most musicians, bartenders, servers do not have health insurance and cannot afford to be admitted to the hospital for any reason. That's just the fact of the matter of the healthcare system in the United States. Tipped workers in the United States, the minimum wage for tipped work is $2.13 an hour, and it's been that way since 1991. Restaurant workers have been reaching out to me concerned that even if they go back to work, there won't be enough customers to support the number of servers that were employed by the restaurant before. And the seniority is who will get the shifts. And because of the reduced amount of people allowed in the restaurant, they're not going to make the tips that they rely on. Their paychecks, literally, when I worked at Hideaway Pizza on Campus Corner for 6 years, the servers at Hideaway Pizza, when they got a paycheck every 2 weeks, it was for $0. Zero. Pretty much all the time. So they're very concerned that they're going to be forced to go back to work, but they're not going to be able to make as much as they were before, and they're not going to be able to get unemployment or any other benefits, and they will be exposing themselves, risking their health without health insurance to pay for it if they do get sick. So as much as I know a lot of people want to go back to work, there are a lot of concerns for people that work in that service industry, people that I care about and know closely. From a city standpoint, I just want everybody to understand that the city of Norman operates almost entirely on sales tax revenue. There is absolutely no motivation that I can possibly think of for why we would keep this city shut down if it wasn't absolutely necessary. We are in a budget crisis that existed before this. And I can assure you, in my opinion, if the 9 of us did not care about the health and safety of the residents of the city, we would open everything immediately so that we could help fix our budget situation, right? We'd want everything to be open and back to normal as soon as possible because we need those sales tax dollars. So in my opinion, if we didn't care, we would reopen everything immediately to save our own budget and not have to lay off city workers, all that stuff. That's stuff I'm worrying about. I'm worrying about the fact that all these businesses are closed, the city's not bringing in revenue, and what we're gonna have to deal with in a few months because of it. I'm still gonna be on the council for at least another year. So I know I'm gonna have to deal with this over the next year and make some really tough decisions, I'm sure. So I would just say to everyone out there that is doubting the motivations of the city council or the city government, there is really no reason for us to keep this city closed other than great concern for the health and safety of everyone. I think people that are at an assisted living center, that I see a lot of people trying to justify the death of people, and it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Well, they would they were vulnerable, they were sick, they would have been, they would have died anyway. I just don't understand that. They would have died anyway. Well, maybe not today and not from this. Maybe they would have lived for another 3 months or 6 months or another year. And if that's your mother or grandma or whatever, I'm sure that extra day or week or month really matters. So to me, saying, well, they would have died anyway because they were old, that's just a real terrible mentality. And I don't understand why anybody would think it's okay to justify their opinion based on that. It's okay that people die because they were older or vulnerable. That doesn't make any sense to me. I spent almost 2 hours today on the phone with a resident, not even of Ward 7. I think he lives in Ward 8 actually, or Ward 4, right on the line where the two meet. And he called me at work, and it was a little bit slow today, so I had some time to talk. And we ended up talking for quite a while. And he just expressed to me his concerns for reopening everything and for keeping everything closed. And we just kind of talked all about it. And he's an older gentleman, and clear to me, he wanted somebody to talk to, and it was nice to have that conversation. But I also just want to express my appreciation to all of you, all the city staff, and Mayor Clark. Everyone can second guess the decisions that are being made, but I know everybody is acting out of the best interests for everybody in this community. All of our families live here too. We're all impacted by, as Councilmember Wilson has pointed out, some of us don't have a job right now. I'm lucky and I still do. But I can tell you it's extremely stressful from my point of view to be open every day and interacting with the public every day. And some people wearing masks, some people not. It's very stressful. I'm concerned about the health of my employees at the store. I'm concerned about my own health. I'm concerned about the health of customers. I mean, it's stressful. I can promise you that. And so I just appreciate all of you watching at home. I know we're going to get through this. It is very tough, and we're all trying to do the best we can. So in addition, just adding on to what Councilor Hall said, the census is extremely important. It has impact of hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, to the city of Norman in federal funding over the next decade. It's extremely important. It may be even more important now than ever. So thank you all. I look forward to getting back to some in-person meetings sometime soon, hopefully. I don't like these video meetings, so I want to see you all in person. Thanks.
Thank you, Council Member. Finally, Councilmember Scott.
Finally, indeed. Murbarak, RIP NMF. I kind of miss you guys. You just reminded me a little bit about how sometimes council meetings go on forever. I do think that we need to institute council comments being about 5 minutes long, no longer. Just really think about what you want to say, including myself, because I can go on and on and on and on and on if I wanted to. Piggybacking off of what Councilmember Hall and Holman said, fill out the census. We need that money. Shout out to Brenda Hall for running these meetings on Zoom. I know it's hard. You're doing a great job. You look good doing it, girl. Keep it up. Okay, shout out to every single one of my council members as well as city staff. I really appreciate all of you. I do, again, kind of miss y'all. I miss the tension. You know what I mean? I miss a little bit of tension. And every single one of you at one point or another has agitated me, including myself, I think. But I do miss that. I appreciate y'all's work. I appreciate your time, the effort, hearing some of the comments. And, you know, I know a couple of y'all are business owners and partners, and what you are going through and what you're suffering through. I keep that in mind. I think about you guys on a daily basis, more than just, you know, as partners, you know, and people on the city council, but as comrades and things like that. I pray for y'all. As far as COVID goes, I've been quarantined, watching birds, bird law. There's no rules. Appreciate what Councilmember Carter sent to us. That was great. I really love birds. They're super exciting to watch. I still have a cat scratch from the beginning of quarantine right here. Don't mess with cats. I love birds though. Anyway, so I have received a lot of calls from business owners. I have received one today. I talked to a woman who is very frustrated about why we are not opening. Why are we not like more? Why are we not doing this? And I respect the leadership of Mayor Clark, of our city council, who have stood strong. Again, while we have all been agitated at each other and it has been very tense in the room before, we have stood very unified, I believe, in this pandemic scenario. And I'm really proud of us for that. And I appreciate that. I really appreciate that. And I have to check myself sometimes because I find myself getting frustrated whenever I'm saying we're coming from a public health standpoint, and people are talking about the economic impact. We are all being economically impacted, especially as stewards of our city budget. We are dependent upon sales tax. And I'm gonna go into that, I guess, a little bit more, but I want to give another shout out to my neighbors who, I'm not like Councilmember Bierman, who has busted out 300 masks, but I have hand woven a couple, and 2 of them were for my neighbors who are across the street here. Yeah, they're not beautiful, but they work, okay? They get the job done. So they brought me over some food, some pie. I'm really appreciative for that, Tina and Shyla. And then I'm grateful that we are acknowledging the mental health impact that COVID-19 has had on our community. While some of us, I still go to therapy. I talk to my therapist via video chat on a weekly basis, and thank goodness that we've been able to adapt in that way, because this is a challenging time. It's lonely. And, we say we're alone together, but at the end of the day, we're alone. Many of us are anyway. And so it's hard, especially when we're fearing for our finances and things like that. So coming back to the sales tax thing, I just want to remind y'all, we have some options. If we were to implement some sort of municipal income tax on, high income earners who have stable incomes throughout pandemic scenarios like this, just something to consider. I'm on my farewell tour too. But, think about a municipal income tax on my way out. And then finally, I'm going to say it, something that this has done, while we're seeing all these people lose their jobs, we're seeing the impact to the city. We're seeing small businesses, our communities being impacted heavily. This pandemic is exposing the woes of capitalism. We have all been through a global pandemic before this, and it is capitalism. Capitalism is a global pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you, council member. Before I give my comments for the evening, I think we will go back to the public comments. I believe we have received some now.
Yes, Mayor, we have. First, we have from Cynthia Rogers. I very much appreciate the discussion about economic development strategies to support local businesses and encourage local innovators. What is the plan to cover the costs of Norman Forward projects included in the amended University North Park TIF project plan if the proposed 89 million bond does not get approved by voters? What is the plan to cover the costs of Norman Forward projects included in the amended University North Park TIF project plan? Sent that one twice, sorry. What are the deadlines for constructing the Norman Forward, and how are these impacted if the bond vote is delayed to August or beyond if the Norman Forward bond fails? Evan Alexander says, I wish I was on the virtual dais with y'all, but I'm glad you're on the team and that Norman has. 2 things, Victory Gardens and war bonds. They don't need to be huge initiatives, but a little would go a long way. Amy Brown says, thank you to the City Council for everything you do. There are a couple comments about Councilmember Carter riding his horse. And Snooky's mom says, thank you for not opening the salons. That's all.
Thank you. Okay. I want to thank all of you for your comments tonight. Some of you are a little extra. You know who I'm meaning by that. But it's an honor to work with you. And I do want to thank all of you for your support. I think I've mentioned in the past that I am a part of several mayors networks, and that's not always the case. And this is really hard. I'm not making this up. I have meetings and phone calls with doctors and our emergency management team. And our emergency management team isn't just our first responders, it's our nonprofits, it's the Chamber of Commerce, it's everybody. I hear from people directly in the industry, and I make decisions based on the long game. We have some industries saying, why are you waiting to open us? We're very sterile and clean. Well, what if we have an uptick and we need all of your sterile equipment and masks and PPE? Like, Can we please have some perspective? And I agree, be kind to each other. You know, if you would have told me in July that it would be one major issue after another and a pandemic, I don't know if I would have taken this. But I am here, and I am not making decisions to get reelected. I am making decisions to keep people safe. That's how I sleep at night. And that's how we are all operating right now. This is not fun for anybody. And I am confused by the comment of when people call me a coward, because this has taken every ounce of the courage I've ever possessed in my life to move forward and to not fold under pressure. Because we got one shot at managing this pandemic, one. And one life lost is enough for me. I think we've all centered on that. You may not know that person, maybe just an old person at a retirement facility, but that was somebody's mother. That was somebody's father, somebody's sister, brother. Every life matters, at least in Norman, Oklahoma. And I will not be pressured, and I will not be bullied. And I'm proud of the steps that we've taken, and they weren't made lightly. We have an amazing emergency management team. City staff has been incredibly flexible and innovative in providing services and content to Norman residents throughout this. And I wish I could say, everything's gonna get better now, but I can't. I hope it does. I will never regret being cautious and intentional in how we move forward, because I think that's what's gonna make the difference. But I worry about the fall. Not only will thousands of young people from all over the nation return to our community, but the flu will as well. So we need to do everything we can to be safe and be smart, and again, focus on the long game. It's an honor to represent this community, even in the worst of times. And I made a statement earlier. I believe the city put it out on their social media and on the YouTube channel. I am confident the best is yet to come. We continue this past year to invest in our schools, our health systems, our public transportation, and we have a bond opportunity before us to invest in accessibility and public safety and quality of life project and small business. The best years are ahead, but we have to get through this. And please do not say things about your neighbors that you can never take back. This is not worth it. And we are better than that. I know we are. So I don't have any other comments tonight. You all have said beautiful things about the situation. And I appreciate the opportunity to get to work with you. And I'm confident we can continue to stand together, because this is just chapter one, at least in my opinion, of coronavirus in 2020, in 2021. And who knows how long this is going to last, but we're going to make data-driven decisions. We're going to speak to medical professionals, and we're going to do the best that we can to support our community. And as Councilmember Bierman touched on, if you're ragging on the city level of government, I really hope that you are reaching out to state and federal government levels as well, because we are all in this together. And I have seen the holes of communication and the holes of services. And if we don't change the Oklahoma Constitution that ties cities to sales tax the way that we do after this, there is no hope for this state. We're feeling it right now, every single city, and it is time to move to the modern world. If we can legalize marijuana and liquor store sales on holidays, then by God, we can do a better job of supporting cities where people actually live. Sorry to get on that little rant, but I'm just beginning on that rant, so hang in there. Thank you, Norman. Thank you, everyone watching tonight. Continue to follow all of our communications on social media and through email. We're all in this together, and we will get through this together. Thank you.
Council is adjourned. Good night, everyone.